Hello, curious minds, and welcome to Documentary for Sleep. Tonight we're asking a question that feels both simple and unsettling. Do we still think with ape brains? If you've ever wondered why anger can flare before reason, why fear takes over before words arrive, or why desire pulls harder than logic, you're already brushing up against this ancient architecture inside your head. Whether you're lying in bed, drifting towards sleep, or just letting this play in the background while you work or cook, this is your moment to slow down and step back into deep time. Because the brain you carry today is not brand new. It's a layered story of primate instincts covered by the thin shell of human reason. This channel is not about wild speculation, but about soft science, archaeology, paleontology, and the biology of memory and mind. We don't pretend to have every answer, but we do have the bones, the fossils, and the lingering questions that tie us to our evolutionary past. And if you happen to drift off while listening, don't worry. I've left timestamps so you can return tomorrow, because this whole journey is worth hearing through. If quiet, long-form storytelling like this helps you learn, relax, or simply feel less alone with your thoughts, consider liking and subscribing. It helps this channel reach more curious sapiens like you. And if you feel like sharing, tell me, do you listen before sleep, or while working, or somewhere far away in the night? And as always, stay curious, stay calm. You are likely reading this on a supercomputer that fits in your palm, a device of crystalline silicon and impossible light. Yet the organ that guides your fingers and interprets these words is running on operating systems forged 2 million years ago. It is not a sleek, new design, but a living artifact. The human brain was not engineered from scratch like a modern electric car. It is a patchwork, a sprawling mansion built upon ancient foundations, where each new wing was constructed without a master blueprint, simply added atop the old. Deep within your skull, beneath the folds of the neocortex that you might consider your conscious self, lies the older world of the limbic system. This is the emotional core, a legacy inherited not from our Homo sapiens ancestors, but from far more distant relatives. Structures like the hypothalamus, the basal ganglia, and the amygdala did not emerge with us. Their origins are humbling, tracing back to the earliest mammals and even the reptiles that scurried beneath the feet of dinosaurs. They are the old machinery of survival, the hardware for hunger, fear, rhythm, and rage. They were perfected for a world that has long since vanished, a world of immediate threats and simple rewards, where a rustle in the grass meant dinner or death. This ancient inheritance is not a silent relic. It is an active, whispering tenant in the house of the mind. Why does a sudden loud noise make your heart leap into your throat before you can even identify the source? Why does the irrational fear of darkness or heights cling to us, even when we know, logically, we are safe? These are not malfunctions of a modern mind, but the flawless operation of an ancient one. The amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster of nuclei, does not consult with reason or check a clock to see if its fears are outdated. It sounds the alarm because that shadow could be a predator. That height could mean a fall. It is a watchman who has never known peace, forever vigilant against dangers that have mostly retreated to the realm of memory and metaphor. Its logic is the logic of the savanna, a logic where the cost of a false alarm is negligible, but the cost of a missed threat is extinction. We like to believe we navigate our lives through the luminous lens of our rationality, through conscious choice and deliberate thought. We chart our courses with spreadsheets and calendars, convinced we are the captains of our souls. But in moments of white-hot anger, of gut-wrenching anxiety, or of irresistible craving, a different hand seems to seize the wheel. The sophisticated neocortex, the seat of language and logic, often finds itself not as the commander, but as the press secretary, rationalizing decisions already made in the deep, emotional dark, spinning a story of control after the fact. We are living a delicate negotiation, a constant dialogue between the new architect and the old ghost in the machine. So if we are not the sole masters of our inner universe, who or what is truly steering the ship when the storm of emotion breaks? What does it mean that the pulse of our modern anxieties is still set by the ancient reptilian rhythm of a fear that once knew only the rustle of leaves and the shadow of a hawk? You see a negative comment online. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a flush of heat climbs your neck, and your fingers freeze over the keyboard. This reaction feels raw, almost primitive. It isn't rational by any modern measure, yet it is profoundly, deeply evolutionary. It is the ghost of a predator's shadow, felt not in a prehistoric jungle, but in the cold glow of a screen. This ancient alarm bell is your amygdala, two small almond-shaped clusters of neurons buried deep within the temporal lobes of your brain. It is a relic, often called the reptilian brain, a piece of neural architecture so old it predates the very notion of reason. Its purpose is singular and brutal: survival. It processes fear, triggers anger, and sounds the siren for stress. It is not a thoughtful librarian, but a battle-hardened sentry, wired to react first and ask questions never. Its speed is its genius. It operates on a timescale that bypasses conscious thought entirely, launching the body into a fight-or-flight response before the conscious mind has even finished registering the threat. Modern MRI scans offer a stark window into this hierarchy. When you encounter an emotionally charged stimulus, a raised voice, a shocking image, a word of criticism, the amygdala's signal lights up the scan like a lightning strike. This surge of electrochemical activity happens a critical few milliseconds, or before. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, reasoning, and executive control, even begins to engage. This neural sequence is a fossilized echo of our past. For a distant ancestor on the savanna, that split-second head start was the difference between life and death. The rustle in the grass could be the wind, but the amygdala's shriek of "lion" ensured they leaped into the tree first and contemplated the nature of rustling later. This system, honed over millions of years, is the reason we are here today. Yet, the world that shaped this exquisite instrument has vanished. The saber-tooth has been replaced by the searing subject line of a late-night email. The territorial rival is now a dismissive comment from a stranger. The rustle in the grass is the relentless ping of bad news streaming through a digital feed. We navigate a landscape of abstract social threats and complex psychological pressures, but our internal alarm system remains an antique. It cannot distinguish between a genuine physical danger and a perceived social slight. The same primal surge of cortisol and adrenaline that once fueled a sprint from a predator now curdles in our veins during a tense video call, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. We are equipped with a biological club in a world that demands a scalpel. So, what happens when our entire online existence seems engineered to pull this ancient lever? When algorithms learned that outrage captures attention more effectively than nuance, and engagement is fueled by the very fear and tribalism the amygdala is primed to detect, the digital world becomes a perpetual trigger, a hall of mirrors reflecting distorted, amplified threats that keep our most primitive defense system in a state of constant, low-grade alarm. We are all huddled around a campfire, but the fire is now a global network feeding us a curated stream of shadows, and the old reptilian part of our brain still jumps at everyone. If this ancient circuitry is so easily hijacked, what does that say about the architecture of our modern minds? We built cathedrals of reason upon this primal foundation. But does the new construction ever truly silence the old ghost in the machine? We compose symphonies, draft constitutions, and calculate the quantum states of particles. Yet we still find ourselves locked in bitter, primal disputes over a perceived slight, a jealous glance, or a word that wounds our honor. This is the human paradox, a creature of staggering intellect whose deepest motivations are often whispered by ancient ghosts. Our greatest achievements are broadcast from the newest, shiniest tower we've built, but the old wiring in the basement still controls the power flow. This modern tower is the neocortex, the crinkled gray mantle that crowns the human brain. Evolution's most recent and ambitious project. It is the seat of our abstract thought, our capacity for language, and our ability to project ourselves forward and backward in time. It allows us to plan for decades, to conceive of justice, to feel awe at the beauty of a mathematical equation. We like to imagine this sophisticated cortex as the CEO of our being, the rational executive in charge. But evolution is not a demolition crew. It is a relentless, conservative hoarder. It rarely dismantles the old to make way for the new. Instead, it builds additions, stacking new structures atop the old, reliable foundations. Our advanced human brain did not replace the older mammalian and reptilian layers. It merely enveloped them, a new administration governing a very old country with deep-set traditions. This means that beneath the polished surface of the cortex, the ancient machinery still hums with potent life. The limbic system, an older, more emotional brain we share with our mammalian cousins, generates our raw feelings of fear, rage, desire, and love. Deeper still lie the primal instincts of the brainstem, the reptilian core that governs our most basic survival rhythms: hunger, thirst, the urge to fight or flee. These are not relics. They are active, powerful tenants in the shared apartment of the skull. Our rationality, for all its glory, is not the originator of our actions, but often a brilliant translator, a spokesperson tasked with justifying the impulses that first erupt from the dark below. Consider a philosopher, a person who has dedicated their life to the study of ethics and moral reasoning. They can deliver a breathtaking lecture on the virtue of forgiveness and the futility of vengeance. Yet, if they were to witness a betrayal by a trusted friend, their first reaction would not be a syllogism. It would be a hot, wordless flash of anger, a tightening in the chest, a surge of adrenaline, the ancient limbic call to arms. Their sophisticated cortex would quickly engage, perhaps arguing for calm, crafting a rational response, or justifying the anger. But the initial spark was not intellectual. It was emotional, visceral, a program written millions of years ago for a world where social betrayal could mean death. We feel first and think second. Our logic is often merely the lawyer hired by our emotions to argue their case. So, if we must assign roles in this neurological parliament, the cortex is not the absolute monarch. It is more like a gifted, eloquent prime minister attempting to govern a nation where a much older, more powerful general, the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell for threat, holds the loyalty of the army and has direct access to the panic button. The prime minister can deliver beautiful speeches about peace, but the general can still launch the missiles based on a raw, unverified fear. This is not a design flaw. It is our evolutionary inheritance. The question then is not how to silence the old brain, but how to foster a better dialogue between the new world and the old. If our mind is not a single unified kingdom, but a layered landscape of different epochs, what does that make of our cherished sense of self? Are we the ruler of this territory, or merely its most recent inhabitant, learning to navigate the ruins and relics of ages we never knew? If we could peel back the layers of the human brain, like the strata of an archaeological dig, we wouldn't find simple biology. We would find a museum, a living, breathing archive of every ancestor who ever scurried, hunted, loved, or feared. It is not a single, elegant organ designed for pure reason, but a palimpsest, a parchment scraped and written over again and again, where the ghostly scripts of our deepest past are still visible, still whispering, still pulling the strings. Imagine a city, not planned but accumulated. Its oldest foundations are crude, powerful blocks laid down in a time of constant threat. Upon these ruins, a more complex settlement grew, a warren of emotion and memory, and crowning it all, a glittering modern metropolis of glass and idea attempting to govern the ancient chaos below. This is the city of the mind. We walk its newest streets, believing ourselves to be its masters, while beneath our feet the old districts hum with a life of their own. We are not a finished product, but a collection, a magnificent and often conflicted assembly of biological history. This layered architecture is often described by the concept of the triune brain, a model that, while a simplification, offers a powerful story. The deepest, most ancient layer is the reptilian complex, the brainstem and cerebellum. This is the old guard, the autopilot. It doesn't think, it is. It commands the beat of the heart, the gasp of breath, the freeze, fight, or flight response. It is the raw, unadorned will to exist. It is the part of you that jolts at a sudden loud noise, that feels a primal unease in absolute darkness, that seeks dominance in territory. It is the foundation of the city, and its laws are simple: survive. Built upon this primal foundation is the limbic system, the old mammalian brain. This is the seat of the emotional world. It houses the hippocampus for memory, the amygdala for fear and aggression, the hypothalamus for pleasure and rage. This is where the cold calculus of survival warmed into something more complex. The fierce bond of a mother to her young, the joy of the pack, the grief of loss, the simmering anxiety of social standing. It is the old town square, bustling with the messy, vibrant business of feeling. It colors the world with value and meaning, remembering not just what was, but how it felt. It is the source of our deepest connections and our most paralyzing dread. And finally, the neocortex, the crowning glory of our primate lineage. This wrinkled mantle of neural tissue, vastly expanded in humans, is the seat of abstract thought, logic, language, and conscious planning. It builds models of the world, runs simulations of the future, and constructs the intricate tapestry of self-awareness. It is the modern city center, with its libraries, universities, and skyscrapers reaching for the stars. It tries to impose order, to narrate, to explain, and to control the ancient impulses rising from the streets below. These layers are not separate kingdoms. They are a constant fluid negotiation, a conversation, sometimes a shouting match, across millions of years. Consider a moment of modern human conflict. You are in a meeting, your neocortex diligently formulating a rational argument, but then a colleague dismisses your idea. A jolt of heat flashes through you. Your jaw tightens. This isn't just a disagreement about strategy. It feels like a challenge, a threat to your status. Your limbic system has been triggered, sounding an ancient alarm of social exclusion. Your pulse quickens, a command from the reptilian core, preparing the body for a confrontation that your modern mind knows is not going to happen. You are a symphony of eras, a congress of creatures, all vying for the microphone. The modern you is trying to speak, while the ancient you is ready to fight. And the mammalian you is feeling the sting of the tribe's rejection. We carry this inner parliament with us everywhere. The thrill of a well-told story taps into the limbic system's love for pattern and social bonding. The obsessive scroll through social media is a hijacking of the ancient brain's need for social surveillance and the dopamine hits of novelty. Our highest artistic and scientific achievements are born in the neocortex, yet they are often fueled by the emotional drive of the limbic brain and the raw, persistent energy of the brainstem. We are a living ecosystem, a walking embodiment of deep time. So how does one live? How does one find coherence with this multi-era brain in a world that only acknowledges the present? How do we navigate the modern world of complex social contracts and abstract deadlines with a mind that still houses the instinct to flee predators and fight for dominance? Is the goal to let the neocortex, the rational modern citizen, become a dictator, suppressing the whispers of the past? Or is it to listen to those ancient voices, to understand their needs and fears, and to integrate their primal wisdom into a more whole, more authentic self? Can we learn the languages of our own deep history, not as a civil war, but as a collaboration between the reptile, the mammal, and the primate? Perhaps the first step is simply to acknowledge the tenets, to feel the surge of anger and recognize the old mammal defending its territory, to sense a baseless anxiety and thank the reptile for its vigilance, even as we reassure it that the shadow was just a cloud. We are not striving for a mind where the new perfectly controls the old, but for a mind where all the layers are in communication, where the ancient wisdom of the body informs the lofty aspirations of the spirit. The challenge is to build a bridge across time, within ourselves. But if the neocortex is our crowning achievement, the seat of our humanity, where did it come from? What evolutionary pressure could have demanded such a radical leap in processing power, in foresight, and in social complexity? The answer may not lie on the open savanna, but above it, in the dappled light and tangled pathways of the forest canopy. For it was in the trees that the primate brain began its great expansion, not for pondering the stars, but for solving a much more immediate and dizzying puzzle. How does one calculate the trajectory of a falling fruit, the strength of a distant branch, and the intentions of a rival, all while navigating a three-dimensional maze that offers both sustenance and a fatal drop? The world of our ancestors was not a flat plane, but a complex lattice of opportunities and dangers, a reality that demanded a new kind of mind, a mind built for leaping, not just in space, but in thought. Every leap from one branch to another was a calculation of life and death. A miscalculation meant a broken limb on the forest floor far below, or the sudden, silent approach of a predator from above. For the early primate, the world was a three-dimensional puzzle, a labyrinth of shifting shadows and uncertain footholds. This constant, high-stakes navigation through the canopy, this relentless demand to calculate distance, to judge the strength of a branch, to remember the precise location of a fruiting tree, did more than just shape its muscles. It began to sculpt the very organ of thought itself. The need to move through the trees, it seems, was the primordial gymnasium for the modern mind. The primate brain blossomed in this world of emerald complexity. The forest was not a passive backdrop, but an active participant in cognition, a demanding tutor that rewarded precision and punished error. Survival hinged on a suite of sophisticated skills. Depth perception became paramount, the ability to judge the gap between a trembling vine and the next sturdy limb. This required the evolution of forward-facing eyes, granting the world in stereo, and a brain capable of interpreting the subtle cues of parallax and shadow. Alongside this, spatial memory grew increasingly elaborate. A successful primate wasn't just strong or fast, it was a librarian of resources, its mind holding a detailed dynamic map of every fig tree, every safe sleeping nook, every hidden water source across a vast and leafy territory. And layered over this physical navigation was the even more complex calculus of social navigation. Living in groups offered protection, but it also introduced a jungle of its own, alliances to be formed, hierarchies to be climbed, favors to be remembered and repaid. The brain had to become a social simulator, predicting the behavior of others, understanding intention, and storing a vast database of faces and their associated histories of trust or betrayal. Studies of our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos, offer a window into this neurological inheritance. Their brains show remarkable development in regions we share. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep within the brain, acts as a master cartographer. In a primate, it is exceptionally tuned for spatial memory, allowing for the mental mapping of a territory that can span miles. Simultaneously, the temporal lobe, particularly the fusiform gyrus, becomes a dedicated processor for faces. A chimp can recognize dozens of individuals, recall their social status, and remember a slight from years ago. These are not abstract talents. They are the bedrock of primate survival. The brain, in essence, was being wired for connection to place, and connection to tribe. The neural pathways that once fired to distinguish a strong branch from a weak one were the same foundational circuits that would later be co-opted to distinguish a sound argument from a flawed one, a friend from a foe. So the next time you find your car keys in a place you don't remember leaving them, yet you instantly recall the subtle, disapproving glance a stranger gave you in a crowded elevator, do not curse your memory. Instead, thank your ancient ancestors. You are operating on a system optimized for a different world. Your brain prioritizes the social cue, the potential threat or ally, over the inert object. That fleeting moment of social assessment, that unconscious filing away of a micro-expression, is a ghost in your neural machinery. A whisper from a time when reading the mood of a rival in a single glance could mean the difference between eating and being eaten. We carry the forest within us, not as a memory, but as a structure of thought. Our capacity for abstract thinking, for building mental models of the world, may have first found its footing not on the solid ground of logic, but in the precarious, dizzying heights of the canopy, where every grasp was a hypothesis and every jump was a testable theory. But what happens when the trees begin to thin? When the familiar latticework of branches gives way to the terrifying, wide-open expanse of the savanna? The brain, this exquisite instrument honed for a life among the trees, was suddenly evicted from its cradle. The rules of the game changed irrevocably. The complex three-dimensional map of the forest collapsed into a vast, two-dimensional plane where danger could see you from a mile away. The calculative mind, so adept at plotting a path through the vertical, now had to learn a new kind of math, the math of horizons, of exposure, of prediction and fear. The creature that stepped out of the shrinking forests was a creature of immense potential, carrying a brain forged in complexity, but it was utterly unprepared for the new world it faced. How do you calculate a leap when there is nothing to leap to? How does a mind built for the intimate scale of the canopy learn to comprehend the terrifying, beautiful emptiness of the grass sea and the new predators that waited within it? Open your eyes to an expanse of golden grass that stretches to the horizon, a sea under a relentless sun. There are no trees to climb, no thick branches to offer refuge. The wind whispers through the blades, a sound that masks both danger and opportunity. In this moment, you are presented with the most fundamental of questions. Are you the hunter, or are you the meal? This was the crucible of the savanna, the new and brutal classroom where our ancestors were forced to enroll. A shift in the ancient climate had slowly but irrevocably changed the rules of the game. The dense, dappled shadows of the forest, a familiar cradle of fruits and hiding spots, were receding. In their place, this open world demanded a new kind of intelligence. It was no longer enough to simply react. Survival here meant you had to think before you had to run. The transition from forest to grassland was not merely a change of address. It was an evolutionary ultimatum. Adapt your mind or perish. Here, on these sun-scorched plains, the story of Homo erectus begins to accelerate. Their bodies changed, achieving the miracle of endurance walking and running, a feat of biomechanics that turned them into persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey to the point of its exhaustion. But the body was only half the equation. The true revolution was happening inside the skull. The savanna was a vast chessboard, and every move had life or death consequences. To navigate it required an unprecedented ability to project into the future. Where would the water be when the dry season came? Where did the herd of antelope gather after the rains? From which direction might a predator stalk, using the very grass as a cloak? This constant grinding pressure to predict, to strategize, to plan, fell squarely upon the developing prefrontal cortex. This region of the brain, the seat of executive function, began to expand and complexify. It became the command center for social coordination, for reading the intentions of others in the hunting party, for holding a mental map of resources and threats. The environment was a ruthless teacher with a simple mantra: those who see first live. The brain, in response, evolved into a hyper-vigilant prediction machine, perpetually running simulations of what might happen next. It learned to associate the rustle in the grass not just with a present threat, but with a dozen possible future outcomes, each requiring a different response. Fear became not just an emotion, but a sophisticated cognitive tool for survival. And that ancient machinery, honed over millions of years, is still whirring within us today. It has not been decommissioned. The vague, prickling sense of anxiety you feel walking alone across a dimly lit parking lot at night, the quickened pulse, the heightened awareness of every shadow and sound, is not some irrational glitch. It is a legacy. Your modern cortex might be processing data about car models and the distance to your door, but deeper, older layers are issuing a far more primal report. The amygdala, that ancient sentinel, is firing signals as if preparing the body to flee a predator it cannot see, It is translating the squeal of distant tires into the scream of a primate ancestor, the echo of footsteps into the approach of a rival hunter. The logic is outdated, but the wiring is intact. We are haunted not by ghosts, but by our own evolutionary history, perpetually ready for a threat that has long since vanished from our immediate world. From this state of constant alert, a profound transformation was forged. The very tool that was sharpened by fear, the predictive, planning brain, became our species' most formidable weapon. We ceased to be just another item on the menu. We began to write the menu itself, through intricate strategy, through the coordinated violence of the hunt, and through the deep, binding emotions that held tribes together against a hostile world. We turned the tables. The prey became the predator. The one who hid became the one who hunted. The brain that learned to fear the lion eventually learned to mimic its power, and then to surpass it. We conquered the savanna not with tooth and claw, but with foresight and fear. But in that triumph, did we simply exchange one set of chains for another? If our modern anxieties are the ghostly echoes of ancient fears on the savanna, what of our relentless drives, our gnawing hungers? The stress of the hunt is gone, yet a different tension thrums through our days. We have mastered the world, but have we mastered the primal engines that first drove us to mastery? The fear of being eaten has faded, only to be replaced by a more insidious perpetual hunger, a hunger for more, a thirst that is never quenched. The predators are gone, so why does the alarm within us never truly silence? You feel your heart hammering against your ribs. Your palms are slick with sweat, your vision tunnels, and a cold dread coils in your stomach. The source of this primal alarm? An unanswered email, a looming deadline, a passive-aggressive comment in a meeting. To your modern, conscious self, these are problems of etiquette and productivity. But to the ancient core of your brain, it has just caught the scent of a predator in the tall grass. It believes, with every fiber of your being, that you are back on the savanna, waiting to be pounced upon. This is the central paradox of our modern existence. We have built a world of astonishing complexity and comfort, a world insulated from the immediate brutalities of nature. Yet we have carried the same brain into this new world, a brain sculpted by eons of life or death emergencies. It is a masterpiece of survival, but it was never designed for happiness, for peace, or for the peculiar, simmering anxieties of the 21st century. Our ancestors' brain did not need to process 100 emails, but it was exquisitely tuned to the faint rustle of leaves, the distant scent of blood on the wind, the sudden shift of a shadow that could mean a lurking lion. Every sense was a tripwire, every moment a calculation of risk and reward. A missed signal was not a social faux pas, it was the end of the genetic line. The machinery for this hypervigilance remains our primary operating system. When a threat is perceived, be it a saber-toothed cat or a critical Slack message from your boss, a tiny region in your brain, the hypothalamus, sounds the alarm. It triggers a cascade, a chain of chemical commands known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, HPA, axis. This flood of cortisol and adrenaline is a biological superpower. It shuts down non-essential functions like digestion and rational forethought, redirects energy to your muscles, sharpens your focus, and prepares your body for the only two responses that ever mattered, fight or flight. This system is brutally efficient, magnificently powerful, and designed for short, sharp bursts of extreme danger. The problem is not the system itself, but the world we have asked it to navigate. Our ancient stressors were acute and physical. The hunger that gnawed at the belly was resolved by finding food or by succumbing to starvation. The thirst that parched the throat was quenched at a watering hole or ended in dehydration. The fear of being eaten was a sprint to safety or a final gruesome conclusion. These were clear-cut stories with definitive endings. Our modern stressors, by contrast, are chronic and psychological. They are not lions we can outrun or clubs we can wield. They are a constant low-grade hum of existential dread. The relentless churn of the 24-hour news cycle, the abstract terror of economic collapse, The social anxiety of perpetual comparison on digital platforms, the endless to-do list that never truly gets done. There is no fight to be won, no clear flight, path to safety. There is only the simmer. And so the HPA axis, this beautiful, archaic tool, is activated again and again and again. The cortisol that was meant to surge for 3 minutes to escape a predator now drips constantly into our systems for weeks, months, years on end. The body remains perpetually on high alert, mistaking the ding of a new notification for the snap of a twig, interpreting a quarterly report as a matter of life and death. We are constantly mobilized for a hunt that never begins and a battle that never arrives. The system, so perfect for its original purpose, becomes a source of its own sickness, corroding us from the inside with inflammation, anxiety, and exhaustion. We are running a marathon with the physiology of a sprinter, and we are forever waiting for a finish line that does not exist. This constant state of siege must have an outlet. If the body is primed for action, muscles tense, heart racing, mind focused on threat, but has no physical release, where does that energy go? The frustration of a traffic jam, the perceived insult from a colleague, the simmering rage at a world that feels endlessly demanding, these become the new savanna. The fight impulse, with no lion to battle, turns inward into self-criticism or outward into petty conflicts. The flight impulse, with nowhere to run, manifests as social withdrawal or endless scrolling, a futile attempt to escape a threat that lives inside our own heads. The ancient hungers are still there too, not just for calories, but for status and security, warped by a world of abundance into insatiable consumerism and a desperate clawing need for more. We have domesticated our environment, but we have not domesticated the wilderness within. The same instincts that allowed a small, vulnerable primate to climb to the top of the food chain now leave us feeling hunted in our own homes. The brain's brilliant, time-tested strategy for survival has become the very source of our suffering. It begs an uncomfortable, lingering question. If our deepest fears and fiercest angers are not flaws, but the echoes of a million-year-old success story, then what are we truly fighting against? And if this ancient wiring equips us so perfectly for a world of immediate physical threats, what does it mean that we now must use it to navigate a reality of our own abstract making? A reality it was never built to comprehend. Your brain was not built to find truth. It was built to not die. We often wear our capacity for thought like a crown, believing the intricate folds of our cortex are the pinnacle of cosmic evolution, a biological supercomputer designed to unlock the universe's deepest secrets. But this is a flattering illusion. The primary overwhelming function of this 3-pound organ is not philosophy or physics. It is survival. Every beat of your heart, every breath you draw, every flinch from a sudden movement, is managed by ancient systems that operate in the shadows, far below the stage of your conscious awareness. Your conscious mind, the part that feels like you, is not the CEO of this vast operation. It is more like a public relations representative, brought in late to a meeting to explain decisions that were made long before it entered the room. Consider the sheer economy of energy. The human brain is a ravenous organ, consuming a disproportionate amount of the body's resources. It is a luxury that evolution could only afford if it paid for itself, and it pays for itself not in elegant theorems or poetic verses, but in pure, unadulterated continuity. It is estimated that a staggering majority of its processing power is dedicated to running the autopilot, managing the countless functions that keep you alive without you ever having to consciously will them. Your brainstem and limbic system, structures we share with far more ancient creatures, are the tireless workhorses. They regulate your temperature, monitor your blood chemistry, prime your muscles for movement, and scan your environment for threats, all in the silent, humming background. Conscious thought, the glittering cascade of language and logic that feels so central to our existence, is merely the newest application, a thin veneer of modern software running on hardware forged in a much older, harsher world. This ancient hardware operates on a logic of immediacy, not accuracy. Its decisions are not about finding an objective truth, but about generating a usable response in the shortest possible time. The food preferences it hardwired, a craving for sugar and fat, were impeccable advice in a world of scarcity. They are a death sentence in a world of plenty. The quick, hair-trigger fear that flares at an unexpected shape in the shadows was a lifesaver when that shape might have been a predator. Now it flares at a creak in the floorboards of a safe house, leaving us with a racing heart and a vague sense of foolishness. Our social instincts, too, are artifacts. The instant unconscious categorization of a stranger as friend or foe, in-group or out-group, was a necessary calculus for tribal creatures. It was a matter of alliance and defense. Today, that same circuitry fuels our most bitter and seemingly rational political and ethical debates. We dress our positions in logic and data, but often we are simply witnessing a civil war within the skull, a pitched battle between the ancient, emotional brain screaming its primal certitudes and the newer cortex scrambling to justify those feelings with elaborate reasoning. We like to believe we are rational actors moving through the world by the light of reason, but we are, first and foremost, animals, highly sophisticated, culturally complex animals, but animals nonetheless. The leash of our evolutionary past is long, and it tugs on us constantly, guiding our steps in ways we rarely acknowledge. Our modern world is a dazzling spectacle of our own creation, a reality of concrete, glass, and digital information that would be utterly unrecognizable to our ancestors. Yet, the operator inside the machine remains the same. The same instincts that guided a primate through a jungle now guide a commuter through a city. The same fears that haunted a hominid on a savanna now haunt a CEO before a board meeting. The hardware has not been updated. It has simply been presented with a new set of data to process through its old survival-tuned algorithms. So if our most profound debates and personal convictions are so often just elaborate post hoc justifications for ancient, subconscious impulses, how can we ever trust our own perception of reality? And if our brain's true purpose is survival, not truth, what does that mean for our quest to understand anything at all? This internal conflict rarely stays internal. It spills out into the open air in our most raw and unfiltered moments. It reveals itself not in what we say, but in what our bodies do when the world moves too fast for thought. When the calculated logic of the modern cortex fails, the ancient brain takes over completely, and we are reduced to our most fundamental tripartite response to existence itself. This is the ghost in the machine, the old program that never closed, waiting for its moment to run. It begins not with a thought, but with a jolt. A shriek of tires on asphalt, the sudden shadow of something falling, a tone of voice that shifts from calm to cutting in a microsecond. In that sliver of time, a space thinner than a conscious moment, the world falls away. The sophisticated narrative of your life, your plans, your worries, your identity, vanishes. There is no time for it. The sensory data, the perceived threat, bypasses the deliberative pathways of the prefrontal cortex entirely. It takes the neural express lane, screaming directly into the amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm bell. This is the moment the autopilot seizes the controls, and in that moment, you are no longer a modern human. You are a body facing a predator on a plane. You are presented with a menu of 3 choices, a triad of responses so fundamental they are woven into the DNA of nearly every vertebrate. There is no fourth option. The body must move. It must do. The first is fight. The body becomes a weapon. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system, a chemical cocktail that is both fuel and command. Blood is shunted away, from the skin and digestive organs toward the large muscle groups. The heart hammers, not with fear, but with a potent, furious rhythm designed for violence. Vision can tunnel, focusing on the source of the threat. The jaw clenches. The fists might tighten. This is not a decision. It is a physiological state. It is the defiant roar of the cornered animal, the desperate lashing out against the inevitable. It is the argument that escalates into a scream, the hand that strikes a wall. It is the ancient, terrifying truth that sometimes the only way out is through. The second is flight. The body becomes an escape vehicle. The same chemical surge occurs, but it is channeled into retreat. Muscles prime to run, to jump, to flee. The perception of pain is dampened. A sprained ankle is irrelevant when a life is on the line. Every resource is dedicated to creating distance. This is the wisdom of the prey animal, the understanding that not every battle is worth fighting. The world is full of things stronger than you. In our modern context, it is the sudden need to leave a room, to end a conversation, to withdraw from a social media thread. It is the cold sweat that breaks out during a presentation, the body screaming that the spotlight is a predator's gaze, and the only safety is in the darkness of the wings. And the third, the most perplexing of the trio, is freeze. The body becomes a statue, the heart rate might even drop. The mind goes blank, a silent, buzzing white noise. This is not a failure of the system. It is a calculated, if deeply passive, strategy. For a predator that keys in on movement, the perfect camouflage is to become part of the scenery, to play dead. In the face of an inescapable threat, the body chooses a last-ditch hope. If I cannot fight it, and I cannot outrun it, perhaps it will lose interest and leave. It is the rabbit in the fox's jaws, the victim of trauma who dissociates, the person who, when confronted with overwhelming criticism or shock, simply shuts down, unable to form a word or make a move. It is the utter surrender of agency, a bet placed on the faint hope that invisibility is possible. We emerged from these primordial moments, our hearts slowing, our breath returning to normal, often flushed with embarrassment. We craft stories to explain our reactions. I saw red, we say of our anger. I just had to get out of there. We explain of our flight. Or we struggle to explain the freeze at all, feeling only a deep sense of shame at our perceived paralysis, our failure to act. We judge these responses through our modern lens of courage and composure. We call them irrational. But they are not irrational. They are irrational. They operate on a logic that predates reason itself. They are the wisdom of the body, etched into our nervous system over millions of years, reminding us that before we were thinkers, we were survivors. We build entire civilizations, cultures of law and art and science, striving to rise above our base nature. We create concepts of courage that valorize standing firm, and we vilify the instinct to flee or freeze. But in the blinding flash of a true crisis, the culture falls away, and all that is left is the animal and its three ancient tools. This is not a failure of character. It is a testament to the depth of our inheritance. The question, then, is not how to eliminate these responses, for they are as much a part of us as our skeleton. The question is how we, the conscious narrators of our lives, choose to meet this ancient ghost when it arrives. Do we fight the feeling of flight? Do we flee from the urge to fight? Do we freeze in the face of our own primality? And in the quiet that follows the storm, as our modern mind tentatively returns to its throne, what story will we tell ourselves about the creature that briefly took control? Your boss calls your name, unexpected, in the middle of a meeting. A cold prickle traces your spine. Your palms go damp, your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird, and your mind, just a moment ago sharp and present, goes utterly, completely blank. You are a deer in the digital headlights, a primal creature in a modern cage. In that suspended second, a conversation is not happening. A negotiation is not taking place. Deep within the ancient architecture of your brain, a much older, more urgent dialogue is unfolding. It is not weighing words or strategies. It is asking the oldest question of all: fight, flight, or freeze. This is the triangle of instinct that never left. It is a ghost in our machine, a vestige of the savanna etched into the circuitry of the cortex. For our ancestors, this triad was the thin line between life and oblivion. The rustle in the tall grass wasn't a metaphor for anxiety. It was the prelude to a leopard spring. The shadow falling over the path wasn't a looming deadline. It was a rival clan. In that world, hesitation was a luxury paid for in blood. The body needed a system that could bypass the slow, deliberative chatter of conscious thought and act with the speed of lightning. It needed a protocol for survival, and it carved one deep into the bedrock of our being. The process is a masterpiece of biological engineering. a silent symphony conducted in the dark. It begins with the amygdala, two tiny almond-shaped clusters of neurons that serve as the brain's sentinel. It is constantly scanning, a hyper-vigilant guard watching for any hint of danger. When it perceives a threat, a shape, a sound, a tone of voice, it doesn't stop to ask questions. It sounds the alarm. A signal screams down neural pathways to the hypothalamus, the command center, which activates the body's emergency broadcast system, the sympathetic nervous system. This is the moment the switch is flipped. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the bloodstream, a chemical tide that changes everything. Pupils dilate to gather more light. Blood is shunted away from the digestive system and toward the major muscles of the legs and arms. The heart rate soars, pumping oxygen-rich fuel to the engines of movement. The body is stripped for action, tuned to a single piercing frequency. Survive. This entire cascade can happen in less time than it takes to blink, a mere 50 milliseconds. It is a system built for the tangible, the immediate, the tooth and claw. But here lies the central paradox of our modern existence. The amygdala, that ancient sentinel, cannot tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a scornful email from a colleague. It cannot differentiate between a rival with a club and a rival with a cutting remark during a presentation. The same physiological tsunami that once propelled a hominid to run from a predator now floods the body of a person staring at a flashing notification on their phone. We are equipped with a weapon of immense power, but the battlefield has changed beyond recognition. The grass no longer rustles, it pings. So we perform the ancient dance on a modern stage. In the conference room, a harsh critique triggers the freeze response. The mind goes blank, the body rigid, a rabbit hoping the hawk will overlook it if it just stays perfectly still. On the highway, a driver cutting us off triggers the fight response. The jaw clenches, the hands grip the wheel, a surge of aggressive heat demanding retaliation, a honked horn becoming our primal scream. Faced with an overwhelming workload, we enact flight, not by running into the woods, but by scrolling endlessly through social media, a digital retreat into a numbing, simulated safety. We are not responding to the email or the traffic jam itself. We are responding to the ghost of the leopard that our nervous system insists is there. Our social stressors are merely new skins on a very old beast. And what happens when this cycle repeats? When the alarm is tripped day after day, week after week, by deadlines and debts, and the constant low-grade hum of societal anxiety. The body is not designed for a perpetual state of red alert. The cortisol, so useful in short bursts, becomes a corrosive agent in a constant stream, eroding our health, fraying our nerves. The energy of that survival response, the powerful urge to fight, to flee, to do something, has to go somewhere. If it cannot be discharged through action, it turns inward, festering. It becomes a pressure cooker with no release valve. It simmers into a low-grade rage, a pervasive irritability, a sense of being perpetually on edge. This compressed energy, this thwarted instinct, seeks an outlet. It looks for a shape, a form, a target. It whispers that the problem is not the internal alarm system, but the external world that keeps triggering it. The frustration that couldn't be expressed to the boss is brought home and unleashed on a family member. The anxiety that has no clear source is projected onto a neighbor who looks different, or a politician who speaks another language. The primal urge to fight, denied its original purpose, curdles into something darker. It morphs from a biological imperative into a social one. The body, screaming for a resolution to its heightened state, can mistake violence for catharsis and conflict for control. But is this transformation inevitable? Is the shift from a frozen fear in the boardroom to a sharp word in the kitchen a simple, linear path? Or does it hint at something more complex lurking within us, a deeper inheritance from our evolutionary past? If the fight response is our inner ape reaching for a club, what does that make the violence that follows? Is it a uniquely human failing, a perversion of society? Or is it perhaps the oldest instinct of all, merely waiting for its moment to swing? Why is it that humanity, the planet's most intelligent species, so often resorts to killing its own kind over patches of land, abstract ideas, or even a comment on a screen. We build soaring cathedrals of thought and art, yet in the shadows of these structures, the old familiar scent of blood and iron still lingers. Is this violence a human invention, a terrible flaw in our cultural design, or something far more ancient, etched into the very bedrock of our being, a primal inheritance from our ape ancestors? To understand the storm, we must first look to the quiet jungle from which we emerged. Conflict is not a product of civilization. It is not something we created along with cities and laws. It is instead a brutal extension of a biological war fought long before the first brick was laid. It is the raw, unchoreographed struggle for a mate, for the best fruit on a sun-drenched branch, for a higher rung on the social ladder that determines who eats first and who sleeps safely. This is the original currency of power, traded not with coins, but with displays of strength, cunning, and coalition. In the dappled light of the forest, our cousins, the chimpanzees, conduct silent campaigns of territorial expansion. They organize calculated raids into neighboring lands, ambushing isolated males with a terrifying, coordinated violence. It is a planned and purposeful act, a grim strategy to eliminate rivals and secure more resources for the tribe. We watch these scenes, and a cold recognition settles in. The blueprint is there, written not in language but in action. Our magnificent human brain, capable of composing symphonies and unraveling the cosmos, inherited this same capacity for strategic, organized aggression. We merely refined the tools and expanded the battlefield, directing a primordial instinct toward goals that are, at their core, astonishingly ancient: the elimination of the other. This inherited machinery of conflict still hums within us, a ghost in the neural machine. Our societies have built vast, complex systems of laws, ethics, and norms, a thin veneer of civilization laid over a deep and restless ocean. These systems regulate and suppress, but they cannot erase the wiring. They can only hope to contain it. This is why a minor insult, a perceived slight in traffic, or a disagreement over a belief can sometimes trigger a cascade of rage that seems wholly disproportionate to the cause. The modern context is new, but the underlying engine is old. The switch is easily flipped, the ancient program booted up, transforming a civilized person into a vessel for a very old kind of war. We carry the potential for both the cradle and the club within the same mind, and the distance between the two is often terrifyingly short. And perhaps the strangest truth of all is this: our most dangerous enemy has never been the monster in the dark, the alien, or the utterly unknown. It is the one who is almost, but not quite, like us. The rival tribe that speaks a similar but different language. The neighboring troop of chimpanzees whose barks and gestures are a distorted mirror of our own. The threat is found in the subtle difference, the slight variation that marks a boundary between us and them. This deep-seated aversion to the other is a thread that runs from the earliest human tribes, for whom anyone outside the clan was a potential threat to scarce resources, to the most sophisticated and horrific forms of modern racism. It is an instinct that once served to protect the group, but when amplified by human intellect and fear, it becomes the foundation for our greatest cruelties. We are wired to find comfort in the familiar and suspicion in the difference, a primal reflex that our complex world constantly and dangerously triggers. So if the seed of violence is indeed sown so deep within our nature, a legacy from a world we have long since left physically but not psychologically, where does that leave our dream of peace? Is civilization ultimately just a prolonged and fragile negotiation with our own inner ape, a constant effort to keep the old ghosts quiet? And if our greatest fear is the other, what does it say that we so often become the very thing we fear? You see someone dressed in a way you don't recognize, speaking a language that sounds like nothing but noise to your ears. In the first second of that encounter, before you've even formed a conscious thought, a conclusion has already been reached deep within the ancient recesses of your mind. It is not a conclusion of logic, but of instinct. A silent, primal alarm. This immediate, visceral reaction to the unfamiliar is not a modern flaw in our character. It is an ancient inheritance, a story written in the neural pathways of our species, a story that begins not in our cities, but in our cradles. Imagine the world as it was for our distant ancestors. The horizon was not a line to be crossed, but a boundary to be feared. Your world was your tribe, a small circle of familiar faces, shared smells, and known rituals. The crunch of a twig under a foot that was not one of your own, the sight of a strange smoke signal from a distant hill. These were not curiosities. They were existential threats. A different group could carry a novel sickness for which you had no immunity. They could covet your waterhole, your hunting grounds, the safety of your cave. In this world, the cost of misidentifying a friend as a foe was a moment of social awkwardness. But the cost of misidentifying a foe as a friend was almost certain death. Survival, therefore, favored the paranoid. It favored those who could instantly categorize the world into a simple binary code: us and them. This is the world that built our brains. Our neurology is a living museum of that time. At the heart of this system lies a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons called the amygdala, our brain's first responder to threat. Neuroscience reveals an uncomfortable truth. This ancient sentinel fires with heightened urgency at the sight of a face from a different racial group. This reaction is startlingly automatic, occurring even in infants as young as a few months old, long before culture or prejudice has had a chance to teach them anything. It is a preloaded setting, a default of the human operating system. We are born with a heightened sensitivity to the outgroup, to those who look different, sound different, smell different. This isn't racism yet. It is the raw, biological clay from which racism can be so easily and so violently sculpted. The tribal markings of old have simply been exchanged for new ones. The unfamiliar skin tone, the accent, the political affiliation, the brand of clothing, the way one worships, or does not worship, a god. These become the new signals that our ancient amygdala uses to perform its crude sorting. The sophisticated hatreds of the modern world, racism, xenophobia, classism, sectarian violence, can all be traced back to this primitive mechanism. It is a tool that was designed for a world of tangible, immediate threats, now misfiring catastrophically in a world of abstract ideas and interconnected nations. We are wielding a Stone Age club in a quantum age, and we wonder why we keep causing so much damage. The instinct to protect us from them was meant to preserve the tribe, but what happens when that instinct is exploited to define the tribe itself in increasingly narrow and hostile terms? This neural machinery, so finely tuned for spotting an external threat, does not simply switch off when no leopard is lurking in the grass. It seeks new targets. It hungers for patterns, for agents, for a narrative of us versus them, even when the true threats are complex, systemic, and impersonal. It is this same brain, with its ancient need for a clear enemy and a simple story, that now scrolls through the endless stream of digital information. And in this new, vast wilderness, it finds a new kind of sustenance, one that feels like knowledge but functions like a poison. It finds the rumor, the piece of misinformation, the grand conspiracy theory. These modern myths tap directly into the oldest parts of our consciousness. They are not spread despite their absurdity, but because of their brilliant, sinister alignment with our deepest wiring. A conspiracy theory provides a perfect, satisfyingly simple them, a shadowy cabal pulling the strings. It explains a complex, frightening world with a single, neat story, replacing anxiety with the addictive clarity of anger. It reinforces tribal identity, creating a bonded us, the enlightened few who see the truth against the blind, foolish them. The very mechanisms that once allowed a band of humans to coalesce and survive on the savanna now make us exquisitely vulnerable to lies that tear the modern world apart. The tool meant for our preservation has become the weapon of our own undoing. So we are left with a haunting paradox. The same neurological impulse that would have made you clutch your child closer at the sound of an unfamiliar dialect is the impulse that now makes you click share on a story that confirms your darkest suspicions about a different group of people. The line between a life-saving instinct and a society-shattering prejudice is terrifyingly thin. We carry the savanna within us, its fears and its factions etched into our very being. We built civilizations to escape the jungle, yet we so often recreate its law within our own minds. If our greatest tool for survival is also our greatest source of division, are we forever destined to be both the architects of our grandeur and the prisoners of our own nature? And if this ancient fear is the key that unlocks the viral spread of a modern falsehood, what does that say about the truth we so desperately believe we are seeking? A ridiculous idea, like the Earth being flat, can capture the imagination of millions. It's a phenomenon that can feel baffling, a sign of a world losing its grip on reason. But to dismiss it as mere stupidity is to miss the deeper, more unsettling truth. The human mind is not a blank slate waiting to be filled with facts. It is an ancient artifact, a beautifully complex relic forged in a world long gone. Its primary directive was never accuracy, but survival. And so, the person who believes the conspiracy theory isn't necessarily a fool. They are simply operating on an old operating system, one that was designed not for the information age, but for the age of predators and peril. Their brain, like all of ours, is wired to believe. Imagine the world that built us, not a world of concrete and streaming data, but one of tall grasses and whispering leaves. In that primordial landscape, the cost of a mistake was not a bruised ego, but a swift and final end. Under that relentless pressure, a specific kind of logic evolved. The survivor was not the one who was most often right, but the one who was most cautious. If the wind rustled the bushes, it was far safer to assume it was a stalking leopard and flee than to assume it was just the wind and risk being eaten. A false alarm costs you a burst of adrenaline and a short sprint. A missed alarm costs you everything. This is the cradle of credulity. Our ancestors were not betting on truth. They were betting on life. And the winning strategy was to err on the side of seeing intention and threat everywhere, to connect dots even when no pattern truly existed, to believe. This deep-seated instinct manifests in the very architecture of our brains through a series of cognitive shortcuts, mental tools that once kept us safe but now often lead us astray. The first is a profound negativity bias. Bad news registers faster, sticks longer, and feels more urgent than good news. A single rumor of poison in the watering hole would instantly override 100 days of safe drinking. This alarm bell is still ringing inside us, which is why a headline about a vaccine's potential rare side effect screams so much louder than the mountains of data proving its safety. Danger, or even the faintest whisper of it, commands our immediate and absolute attention. Then there is patternicity, the irresistible urge to find connections and narratives in random events. For the human mind, chaos is intolerable. A world without cause and effect is a terrifying place. So, we weave stories. The hunter who noticed that a certain bird's call often preceded the arrival of prey would link the two, and his success rate would improve. He didn't need a double-blind study. He needed a rule of thumb. But what if the bird called and no prey came? The cost of believing the false pattern was negligible. The cost of ignoring a real one was starvation. Our brains became exquisite pattern detection machines, but with a fatal flaw. We are so good at it that we often see patterns that are not there. We connect the dots of unrelated tragedies and see a conspiracy. We see a face in the moon. We hear a secret message when a record is played backward, and when the pattern is found, we demand a why. This is where agency detection comes in, the tendency to believe that an event is caused by an intentional agent rather than by impersonal forces or chance. A branch snapping in the forest is not just wind and physics, it's a presence. It has a will. This instinct to attribute intention is the seed of mythology, of religion, and of conspiracy theory. It is far less frightening to believe that a pandemic was engineered in a shadowy lab by a malicious actor than to accept that it was a random, tragic act of nature. The first offers a villain, a story, a target for our fear and anger. The second offers only the cold, indifferent chaos of a universe that does not care about us. Our ancient brain will choose the villain every time. It is a more comfortable, more comprehensible monster. So we arrive at our modern world, a dizzying carnival of information. The same brain that once scanned the savanna for lions now scrolls through a digital feed. But the feed is not neutral. It is a funhouse mirror, expertly designed to amplify our deepest, oldest instincts. The algorithms that govern our social media are not evil. They are simply ruthlessly efficient. Their goal is engagement, and they have discovered that nothing is more engaging than the primal ping of a threat, the compelling click of a revealed pattern, the satisfying closure of a simple story with a clear villain. Negativity bias is fed a constant drip of outrage and fear. Patternicity is indulged with curated streams of evidence that perfectly confirm our biases, connecting dots across continents and decades into a grand, sinister design. Our need for agency is satisfied by naming the culprits: a secret society, a corrupt government, a hidden elite. We are not drowning in misinformation because we have become less intelligent. We are drowning because our environment has become perfectly, tragically tailored to exploit the very vulnerabilities that once kept us alive. The rustle in the digital bushes is constant, and it always sounds like a leopard. The modern conspiracy theory is not a virus attacking a healthy mind. It is a prehistoric meme, finding its ideal host in a brain that was always prepared to receive it. We are being hunted by the ghost of our own survival. This leaves us with a profound and uncomfortable reflection. If these impulses are woven into the fabric of our being, if our very neurology predisposes us to certain kinds of belief, then what is the true nature of rationality? Is it our default state, or is it a fragile discipline, a hard-won skill we must constantly practice against the pull of a much older, more instinctual self? We like to believe we follow the evidence to reach a conclusion, but so often we reach a conclusion and then go hunting for the evidence that confirms it, a process called confirmation bias that feels like reasoning, but is merely the brain reinforcing its own pre-existing story. We are storytelling creatures, and the most compelling story is always the one that makes us feel safe, right? And part of a group that knows the real truth. So, the question is not how to cure people of their irrational beliefs. The question is far more personal, more philosophical. In a world that constantly tickles our ancient alarms, that feeds our hunger for patterns and villains, how do any of us truly know what is real? We are all running software designed for a world that no longer exists, on hardware that hasn't been updated in millennia. We carry an ancient jungle within our skulls, and we have unleashed it upon a digital universe. And if our brain cannot tell the difference between a rustling bush and a viral tweet, between a real predator and a fabricated threat, then what happens when the fear feels exactly the same? Your heart hammers against your ribs, a cold sweat pricks at your skin, your breath catches in your throat. This is the physiology of terror, the ancient symphony of a body preparing to fight or flee. But there is no predator in the shadows, no sudden drop beneath your feet. The trigger was a single blue checkmark, a message read but unanswered. In the silent theater of your mind, a primal drama is being staged. Your brain, that ancient and magnificent organ, has just convinced your body it has been cast out, left to face the wilderness alone. This reaction feels irrational, a glitch in our modern matrix. Yet to our neural architecture, it is a perfectly logical, life-saving response. We are built for the plains and the forests of our deep past, not for the digital savannas we now inhabit. In that ancestral environment, banishment from the tribe was not a social slight. It was a death sentence. It meant no shared warmth against the cold, no extra eyes to spot the stalking predator, no hands to help bring down game. To be alone was to be prey. And so, over millennia, The human brain became exquisitely tuned to any hint of social exclusion. It developed a hair-trigger alarm system for rejection, a mechanism so vital to survival that its echoes still shake us to our core. This alarm system has a name: the amygdala. This small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep within the temporal lobe is the sentinel of the soul. It is the first part of the brain to process threat, the trigger for the cascade of stress hormones that prepare the body for action. For most of human history, its primary concerns were immediate and physical: the snarl of a carnivore, the sudden loss of footing, the aggressive posture of a rival. But the amygdala is not a sophisticated critic. It is a crude but efficient guard dog. It cannot distinguish the nuance between a threat to your body and a threat to your social standing. It only knows danger. And the neural pathways that light up when we experience physical pain are strikingly similar to those that flare when we feel the sting of rejection. A broken bone and a broken heart, in the dim light of the limbic system, can look terrifyingly alike. Science has given us a window into this profound overlap. Neuroimaging studies reveal a fascinating truth. When a person is subjected to experience of social ostracism, even in a sterile laboratory setting, the same regions of the brain associated with the sensory component of physical pain, the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, snap to life. The brain is quite literally registering social rejection as a physical injury. In one telling experiment, participants who were excluded during a simple virtual ball-tossing game called cyberball reported significant distress. Their brain scans mirrored those of someone suffering a genuine physical insult. The game was meaningless pixels on a screen. The other players were strangers they would never meet. Yet the pain was registered as real, visceral, and acute. The amygdala had sounded the alarm, and the entire body stood to attention, ready for a threat that existed only in the symbolic language of social connection. We now live our lives immersed in a sea of these symbols. The unfollow, the unanswered text, the public comment that receives no likes, the deliberate ghosting after a deep conversation, these are the modern hieroglyphs of rejection. Each one is a tiny drama of exclusion played out on the glowing stage of our devices. We know, intellectually, that a declined friend request is not a sentence of exile. We understand that a sarcastic comment from a stranger is not a physical assault. Yet our bodies do not. Our nervous system, honed by millions of years of evolution, receives these digital signals and translates them into the oldest of languages, the language of survival. A heated argument in a comment section can send our heart rate soaring as if we were facing down a rival for resources. The silence from a loved one on a messaging app can induce an anxiety that feels indistinguishable from the dread of being left behind on the open plain. This neural confusion creates a peculiar kind of suffering, a constant low-grade hum of existential threat generated by the very tools designed to connect us. We are haunted by phantoms, reacting with the full force of our biology to dangers that are, in the material world, utterly illusory. The club that once protected us from predators is now swung wildly at shadows on a wall. We are equipped with a biological masterpiece, a system designed for life or death struggles, and we have pointed it at a like button. The result is a civilization navigating a world of profound and constant social interconnection with the raw, terrified psyche of a hominid afraid of the dark. But if the amygdala is the ancient, overzealous sentinel raising a perpetual alarm, then what is the siren song that keeps us willingly glued to the battlements, staring into the digital abyss that so terrifies us? The mechanism of threat is only half the story. The true engine of our modern dilemma is far more seductive. It preys not on our fear of pain, but on our deepest craving for reward. The same brain that cannot tell a physical threat from a social one also struggles to distinguish a nourishing connection from a cheap, dazzling simulation of one. We have identified the guard dog, but who is handing it the false alarms, and why does it so eagerly accept them? The answer lies in a whisper of a neurotransmitter, a chemical key that unlocks the vault of desire and compels us to return, again and again, to the scene of the crime. But if the pain of rejection is the stick, then the promise of connection is the carrot, a promise delivered not in sustenance, but in a fleeting, electrifying pulse that keeps us hungry even as we are fed. The amygdala's panic is only amplified by another system, one that thrives on the very uncertainty and variable reward that defines our digital landscape. We have built for ourselves a world of intoxicating, perpetual jeopardy, where every notification could be a threat or a treasure, and our brain, desperate to tell the difference, is left in a state of exhausting, exhilarating suspense. What happens when the lure of the reward becomes so potent that it not only triggers our fears, but begins to systematically dismantle the very faculties we rely on to calm them? We scroll through a digital savanna, but the predators here do not have teeth and claws. They are armed with pixels and algorithms. The prey is not a grazing antelope, but our own fleeting attention. This new wilderness, vast and endlessly connected, is not optimized for the hunt of sustenance, but for the hunt of emotion. It is a landscape where the ancient pathways of our brain, forged in a world of immediate physical threats, are now mapped onto a realm of abstract social danger. We did not evolve for this. And so, when we log on, we are essentially time travelers, dropping a brain perfectly adapted for life in small, interdependent tribes into a global, chaotic, and perpetually shouting coliseum. This coliseum operates on a currency that is older than money, older than language. Raw, unfiltered emotion. Social media platforms in their purest mechanistic function are not forums for reason. They are engines that run on visceral fuel. Anger, fear, tribalistic outrage, envy. These are not bugs in the system. They are its high-octane fuel. They are the preferred delicacies of one of the most ancient parts of our neural architecture, the amygdala. This small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons, buried deep within the temporal lobe, is our internal sentinel. It is the part of the brain that screams, "snake." A crucial split second before the conscious, reasoning cortex can even begin to process the long, curved shape on the path. It is designed for survival, not for nuance. It trades in absolutes, not ambiguities. And in the modern world, it is constantly, relentlessly under siege. The architecture of these platforms is a perfect, almost diabolical key to the amygdala's lock. Consider the sheer velocity of information. A real-world conversation unfolds at the speed of human speech, with pauses, breaths, and nonverbal cues that act as natural dampeners on emotional escalation. But online, a heated argument can explode across a dozen comments in under a minute. There is no time for the cortex to catch up. The amygdala is activated, flooded with the perceived threat of a disagreeable opinion or a challenging comment. The heart rate quickens, muscles tense, a full-body response to a threat that is, physically, nowhere to be found. The rational mind is left in the dust, an antiquated librarian desperately trying to find a reference book while the building's fire alarm is blaring. This is not a design flaw. It is the core design. Content that sparks high-arousal negative emotions spreads significantly further and faster than neutral or positive content. A headline that provokes outrage is shared, retweeted, and engaged with at a rate that dwarfs a headline about a scientific discovery or an act of kindness. The algorithm, an insatiable and immoral beast, learns. It sees that anger performs. And so, it serves us more of what makes us angry, carefully curating a reality that keeps our amygdala in a state of perpetual low-grade alarm. This is not an abstract process. It is a biochemical one. Each time we engage with this content, each furious tap of the like button on a post we despise, each swift, agitated share to decry an injustice, a tiny hit of dopamine is released in the brain. Dopamine, the molecule of anticipation and reward. We are not being rewarded for finding truth or building community. We are being rewarded for participating in the hunt. The click, the share, the comment, they are the modern equivalent of a successful throw of a spear. The brain registers a win. A threat has been identified and engaged. The tribe has been warned. We feel a sense of purpose, of clarity, in that moment of outrage. It is a potent, addictive feeling. And so, We come back for more. We develop a craving for the savanna, for the clear-cut drama of predator and prey, for the simple rush of being right and seeing our enemy vanquished in the comments section. We become addicts to a conflict that has no resolution, chasing the dopamine hit of moral certainty in a world that is anything but certain. The anger we feel, the divisions we deepen, the fears we cultivate online, they rarely stem from a place of deep, reasoned conviction. They are, more often than not, the primal output of an ancient system being expertly manipulated by a digital one. We are not arguing with another person's cortex. We are pitting our amygdala against theirs. Two ancient sentinels screaming across a digital void, each convinced the other is a mortal threat. The algorithms act as puppet masters, pulling the strings of our most basic instincts, and we dance to a tune we believe we are composing ourselves. We are convinced of our own rationality, our own agency, even as our heart hammers in our chest and our fingers fly across the keyboard in a rage we will likely feel ashamed of an hour later. The line between user and used becomes terrifyingly thin. So we scroll, and we click, and we share, feeding the beast of our own outrage, mistaking the firing of our neurons for the formation of a thought. We are crafting a new reality, not with intention, but with impulse, building a world that perfectly mirrors our most ancient fears. And in this endless feedback loop, where emotion dictates engagement, and engagement dictates reality, we must ask, if the savanna is now digital, and the hunt is for our own attention, what does it mean to be the predator when you are also the prey? And if the stories that spread the fastest are the ones that feel the most true, rather than the ones that are the most true, what kind of world are we building inside our own heads? A world shaped not by facts, but by the most compelling narrative. We live in an age of information, yet we are constantly swept away by a current of untruths. A headline screams from the screen, a video clip shocks the conscience, a whispered story spreads through a family chat. We see it, feel the jolt, and our finger hovers over the share button. Often, it clicks. The false but fascinating tale travels farther and faster than any plain, unvarnished truth. This is not a simple failure of our modern character. It is a profound and ancient story written into the very architecture of our minds. Our brains were not built for verification, but for survival. In the economy of attention, a compelling lie is a more valuable currency than a boring fact. Imagine the world of our distant ancestors. The air is cool, the fire crackles, and the darkness beyond the circle of light is absolute, filled with unknown sounds. In this world, information is not about curiosity. It is a matter of life and death. A rustle in the grass could be just the wind, or it could be a stalking predator. The person who assumes it is the wind might not live to tell the tale. The person who jumps at the sound, who shouts a warning, who tells the story of the near miss with vivid, terrifying detail, that person survives, and their story survives with them. The tale of the fox that carries a sickness and hunts men will be told and retold, each time with more urgency, its details sharpened for maximum impact. The mundane report that everything was normal today is forgotten by sunset. It holds no value, offers no lesson, sparks no protective fear. Our neural pathways were carved in this world, honed to prioritize the unusual, the threatening, the emotionally charged. We are the descendants of the nervous, the dramatic, the storytellers who survived by erring on the side of catastrophic thinking. This deep-seated preference is not a flaw, it is a feature. Psychologists call it salience bias, our brain's automatic filter that flags information that is novel, threatening, or emotionally resonant. It is the mental equivalent of a spotlight, illuminating what stands out from the monotonous background of everyday life. And what stands out is rarely the calm, the balanced, or the statistically likely. More powerfully, our minds are not passive receivers of data. They are relentless interpreters. We are meaning-making machines, desperate to weave the chaotic threads of events into a coherent causal narrative. We crave stories with clear villains and heroes, with simple morals and satisfying consequences. A random, senseless tragedy is cognitively unbearable. We must find a pattern, a reason, a fault. This is where the false story finds its most fertile ground. It doesn't present dry data. It offers a ready-made saga. It provides the surprise, the clear cause and effect, the moral outrage that our brain is primed to accept. It fits the template of a good story, and in doing so, it feels intuitively true, bypassing the slower, more laborious circuits of critical analysis. So, why do we share that shocking video before we've had a chance to check its source? The answer lies in a neurological race, and the older, faster part of our brain almost always wins. The initial spark is fear or outrage or triumphant validation, a surge of emotion processed by the amygdala, the ancient sentinel of our limbic system. It reacts in milliseconds, flooding our body with the chemicals of alertness. This is swiftly followed by a hit of dopamine, the reward chemical associated with novelty and discovery. Sharing a piece of startling information feels good. It makes us the bearer of important news, the one who warned the tribe, the person in the know. It grants a moment of social significance. By the time our prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, reason, and impulse control, has booted up to ask the careful questions, is this real? Where did it come from? The emotional and chemical reward has already been banked. The impulse has often already become action. We are left to construct a logical justification for an essentially emotional deed. But this is about more than just news stories shared on a screen. This ancient wiring affects the very stories we tell about ourselves and our world. It shapes our political affiliations, our judgments of others, our deepest fears and hopes. We are drawn to narratives that confirm our existing worldviews, that paint our group as righteous and others as a threat, because these too are survival stories for the modern tribe. The drama is not just out there, it is within us, a constant production written by a mind that prefers a compelling lie to a complicated truth. If our consciousness is the storyteller, then it is a storyteller with a strong bias for ratings over reality. So where does that leave us, the heirs of this dramatic impulse? If our greatest tool for understanding the world is inherently biased toward the sensational, can we ever truly see what is real? Or are we forever captivated by the shadow play of our own design? You find yourself scrolling, thumb flicking upward in a rhythmic, almost unconscious pulse. Minutes dissolve into an hour, then two, a parade of dancing cats, life hacks you'll never use, and 60-second dramas flashes by, each holding your attention with an effortless grip. Yet, later, when you sit with a book, the words on the page seem to swim. Concentration fractures after a single paragraph. This isn't a personal failing, a sign of laziness or a degraded intellect. It is, instead, a profound mismatch. You are trying to navigate a superhighway with a brain built for footpaths. The ancient primate hardware between your ears was never designed for the deep, linear immersion of reading. It was engineered for the immediate. Imagine the world of our distant ancestors. The rustle in the tall grass wasn't a piece of content to be analyzed. It was a binary question demanding a split-second answer: fight or flight. The glance of a rival across the savanna, the approving nod from an elder, the scent of ripe fruit on the wind, these were the original notifications. Survival depended not on contemplative wisdom, but on rapid, efficient feedback. The brain became an exquisite instrument, fine-tuned over millennia to prioritize the new, the sudden, the now. It learned to crave signals that resolved uncertainty quickly, rewarding the body for paying attention to what mattered in the immediate moment. This neural machinery, honed for a world of tangible threats and fleeting opportunities, is the very same we carry with us today. We just dropped it into a new jungle, one made of algorithms and infinite scroll, where the rustling grass is a perpetual manufactured symphony. At the heart of this system lies a powerful ancient neurochemical, dopamine. It is often mislabeled as the molecule of pleasure, but its true role is far more nuanced and potent. It is the currency of anticipation, the signal of salience. It is the chemical whisper that says, "Pay attention, this is important. More of this might be coming." In the ancient world, it would surge at the sight of a potential prey animal, fueling the focus for the hunt. It would spark at a potential social alliance, encouraging grooming and conversation. It is the engine of seeking, not necessarily of finding. Our modern world, however, has discovered the cheat code to this system. A like on a post, a vibrating notification, a new email in the inbox. These are hyper-efficient, supernormal stimuli. They deliver a micro-dosage of that coveted dopamine hit, confirming a social connection or delivering a piece of novel information with zero delay and minimal effort. The brain, ever the efficient learner, is swiftly reprogrammed. Why embark on the long, uncertain dopamine drip hunt of reading a complex book when you can receive a dozen confirming hits in the time it takes to read this sentence? The circuit is rewired to seek the quickest, most reliable return on its attentional investment, prioritizing the immediate spark over the slow burn. This recalibration manifests not as a single flaw, but as a spectrum of modern dissonances. The endless scroll through social media isn't just a habit, it's a targeted harvest of micro-validations, each like a digital berry easily plucked. The compulsive online shopping spree, the retail therapy, is less about the object itself and more about the acute thrill of the purchase, the click of "buy now," delivering a jolt of decisive action and anticipated reward. The struggle to focus on a long-term project, to study for an exam whose payoff is months away, is a battle against a brain that has been taught that effort should be instantly gratified. We are not simply being distracted. We are witnessing a deep evolutionary mismatch. It is the equivalent of a Stone Age hunter, wired for the pulse of the chase, trying to find satisfaction in the sterile, prepackaged meat of the supermarket. The instincts are there, powerful and primal, but the environment renders them obsolete, even destructive. We are ancient apes trying to play a new game on a field designed to exploit our every innate weakness. Yet to frame this solely as an individual struggle of willpower against temptation is to miss the deeper, more unsettling truth. This dopamine-driven loop taps into something even more fundamental than a reward circuit, our profound, hardwired need for tribal belonging. For a social primate, exclusion was a death sentence. The approval of the tribe, our standing within the hierarchy, was paramount. The like, the share, the comment, these are digital, quantifiable proxies for that ancient life-or-death currency, social validation. Our brain, desperate for its place in the troop, interprets these signals with a gravity that belies their digital ephemerality. Every notification is a potential elevation in status. Every silence, a faint echo of ancestral exile. We aren't just addicted to dopamine. We are addicted to the feeling of being seen, acknowledged, and included. The feed becomes our digital savanna, and we are constantly scanning it for signs of our place within the herd. So if our deepest drives are being hijacked by environments engineered to exploit them, where does that leave our sense of agency? Are we merely passengers in our own skulls, watching as ancient circuits light up to modern sirens? Or does understanding this machinery offer us the first, faint tool to steer it? If the brain can be reprogrammed for the immediate, can it not also be retrained for the profound, the delayed, the deeply human? The real question may not be how to resist the pull of the feed, but how to build a new kind of tribe, one that values depth over distraction and connection over mere connection signals. We evolved to seek our reflection in the eyes of others. What happens when the only eyes upon us are the unblinking, algorithmic ones of the digital crowd, reflecting back not who we are, but what we are most likely to click on? You just posted a photo, a simple fleeting moment, captured and cast into the digital ether, and then the wait begins. You place the phone face down, but its silent pull is a physical force. A minute passes. You pick it up. Nothing. You scroll through other feeds, but your mind is anchored to that single image. You check again. Still nothing. A cold, slight dread, irrational but undeniable, begins to creep in. In 10 minutes, you've checked 12 times. Why? Why does the silent judgment, or worse, the silent indifference of others, hold such power over us, capable of lifting us to a giddy high or plunging us into a quiet anxiety? This itch for validation is not a modern weakness. It is an ancient, hardwired inheritance. To understand this pull, we must travel back to a world of rustling grasslands and dense, shadowed forests. For our ancestors, existence was a fragile thread. Survival was not an individual sport. It was a collective project. A solitary human was a dead human, easy prey for predators, vulnerable to the elements, and cut off from the shared knowledge and resources of the tribe. To be cast out, to be shunned, was not a social inconvenience. It was a death sentence. The sharp sting of rejection, the cold sweat of exclusion, these were not mere emotions. They were the body's most urgent alarm system, screaming that one's very survival was on the line. The desperate need to belong, to be seen as a valuable member of the group, was as crucial as the need for water or shelter. It was written into our bones through millennia of natural selection. Those who cared deeply about their social standing were the ones who stayed, who thrived, and who passed on their genes. We are the children of the accepted. This is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a physical reality etched into the very fabric of our brains. Neuroscience has illuminated a profound truth. The pain of a broken social bond is not abstract. When we experience the ache of being left out, the burn of a cutting remark, or the hollow void of being ignored, our brain processes this social injury in the same region it processes physical pain, the anterior cingulate cortex. This is a stunning piece of biological poetry. A snub from a colleague, a missed invitation to a gathering, the silent treatment from a friend. These events trigger a neural response almost identical to that of a physical blow. Our mind, in its ancient wisdom, makes no sharp distinction between a broken arm and a broken heart. Both are threats to the organism. One threatens the body's structural integrity, the other threatens the social integrity that the body depends on for survival. The system is old, efficient, and brutally effective. It ensures we pay attention to our social standing with the same visceral urgency with which we would attend to a wound. And so, we perform. We constantly, subtly, and often unconsciously sculpt our identities to fit the expectations of the tribe. We sand down the rough edges of our opinions in a heated discussion to avoid conflict. We choose our clothes not just for comfort, but as a uniform signaling our belonging to a particular tribe, be it corporate, artistic, or subcultural. We laugh at jokes we don't quite find funny, and we nod along to ideas we haven't fully digested, all in the silent service of cohesion. This is not a sign of a weak character. It is the echo of an ancient primate instinct. It is the human equivalent of a monkey carefully grooming a higher-ranking member of the troop, not out of pure affection, but to reinforce a vital social bond, to say, I am here, I am useful, I am one of you. Our digital world did not invent this game. It simply gave it a new, hyper-efficient stadium. The social media feed is our new watering hole. The like button is a quantifiable, instantaneous grooming gesture. The follower count is a stark, numerical representation of our social capital. The view metric is the digital equivalent of the approving glance from across the ancient campfire. These are not shallow shoe wrong. They are the modern tokens of an ancient currency, the currency of acceptance. We scroll through this endless stream of lives, and our ancient brain, the one that evolved to track status in a band of 100, is now trying to compute its worth against a global tribe of billions. It is an overwhelming, exhausting task for a piece of hardware that was never meant for such scale. The same instinct that once ensured our survival now leaves us perpetually thirsty, drinking from a fire hose of social feedback that can never quite quench the ancient need. Yet this deep biological drive for belonging carries a hidden and terrible cost. The same glue that binds the tribe together can also suffocate the individual spirit. The relentless pressure to conform, to seek the approval of the group, does not only foster harmony and cooperation, it has a darker twin, a shadow that follows every step we take in the social world. For if acceptance is life-giving warmth, then the fear of rejection is a cold that can freeze us from the inside out. This constant vigilance, this endless performance, breeds a suite of emotions that are the ugly, necessary underbelly of social life. It cultivates the bitter seed of envy when we see a rival secure the approval we crave. It nurtures the hot, creeping vine of shame when we believe we have failed to meet the tribe's standards. It fuels the anxious, relentless engine of social comparison, where we measure our own behind-the-scenes reality against everyone else's highlight reel. These feelings are not modern corruptions. They are the ancient emotions of the primal tribe, the dark taxes we pay for the security of membership. They are the price of the ticket for belonging. And so, we are left standing at the crossroads of our own nature, holding our phones, hearts, and histories with a single, lingering question: if the need to belong is what saved us, then what parts of ourselves must we sacrifice to pay the price? You see the photo of a colleague's promotion celebration, a friend's dream vacation from a balcony overlooking the sea, the announcement of a peer's brilliant success. A cold, heavy stone seems to drop into your gut. It's a familiar feeling, a sour cocktail of lack, of inadequacy, of wanting. We've been taught to call this envy, a personal failing, a character flaw to be suppressed and shamed. But what if this feeling is not a bug in your system, but a very old, very sophisticated piece of software? Not a weakness of your character, but an ancient instrument of competition, a finely tuned radar for social navigation that has, quite suddenly, found itself in a world it was never designed for. To understand this, we must travel back. Not to a simpler time, but to a more physically immediate one. Imagine the world of our ancestors, living in small, tightly knit bands on the African savanna. Survival was not an individual sport. It was a collective endeavor, but one played on a fiercely competitive field. Your life depended on your standing within the group. The one who garnered more attention, more respect, was not just popular. They were privileged. They had better access to food when the hunt was successful. They received more protection when predators prowled the perimeter of the firelight. They were the chosen mates, their genes flowing into the next generation with a greater certainty. In this world, status was not an abstract concept of self-esteem. It was calories. It was safety. It was genetic legacy. To be ignored, to be relegated to the lower rungs, was to flirt with oblivion. And so, the mind evolved a relentless unconscious calculator, constantly measuring the self against the other. Who is stronger? Who is faster? Who is receiving more grooming, more shares of the meat, more glances of approval? This comparison was not a pastime. It was a vital dashboard for monitoring one's social capital. This dashboard runs on a specific fuel, a suite of social emotions we now label as negative. Shame, that hot, shrinking feeling of exposure. Envy, that green-eyed ache for what another possesses. The sting of humiliation. Neuroscience now reveals that these distinct feelings, which we experience so personally and profoundly, all light up the same ancient regions of the brain. They are neural alarms, each a different frequency of the same core alert. Your social status is under threat. You are in danger of being devalued, of slipping down the hierarchy. Shame screams that you have been seen as less, that you have failed to meet the group's standards. Envy hisses that another has what you need to rise, that they possess a resource, be it material, social, or romantic, that is rightfully yours to claim. This is the old machinery at work, a survival operating system whose primary goal was to maintain the most optimal position within the tribe. It is a system built not for happiness, but for strategic advantage, not for contentment, but for constant, vigilant comparison. Now bring that ancient brain, with its ancient fears and ancient calculations, into the present. Place it in front of a smartphone screen. This is the great irony of our time. We have taken a mind shaped for life in a 100-person tribe and unleashed it upon a planet of billions. Social media is not merely a network. It is the ultimate infinite safari for the status-seeking mind. It is a relentless, curated, and brutally efficient hierarchy engine, Every scroll is a new encounter with a rival. Every feed is a cascade of potential threats. That person is more beautiful, their body a testament to a discipline you lack. That one is more traveled, their life a gallery of sun-drenched moments that mock your routine. That acquaintance is more successful, their career a soaring arc next to your plateau. The brain does not understand that these are highlights, fragments, illusions. It processes them with the same raw, urgent intensity as our ancestor watching a rival receive the largest cut of meat. The primal software boots up, the comparison is made, the status alarm blares, and we react, exactly as the ape would, with a surge of competitive anxiety, a need to post our own kill, to showcase our own worth, to reassert our place in the ever-shifting digital troop. We are using a Stone Age tool to navigate a Space Age jungle. This leaves us at a curious crossroads, a point of deep tension within ourselves. We possess a magnificent cortex, capable of reason, of art, of profound logic and self-awareness. Yet, it is built upon a much older foundation, a limbic system that prioritizes tribal standing above all else. When this ancient system is triggered, when it feels its social rank is truly threatened, it can and will override the modern mind. It will sacrifice long-term goals for a short-term status boost. It will choose the comfort of belonging to a group over the lonely path of a difficult truth. It will rationalize petty jealousies and inflate minor slights into existential conflicts. The drive to not be at the bottom, to not be the one left behind, is so deeply wired that it can make us irrational, anxious, and endlessly discontent, all in the name of a security that no longer exists in the way it once did. So we are left to wonder, as this old software hums in the background of our modern lives, if the very engine that once ensured our survival might now be the thing that limits our progress. If the price of this ancient vigilance is a perpetual low-grade anxiety, a constant feeling of not being enough, and if this desperate, often unconscious need to constantly monitor and defend our rank makes us exquisitely vulnerable to the next trap of the tribal mind, the powerful, seductive urge to surrender our own judgment for the warm, unquestioning safety of the crowd. When the fear of being wrong is outweighed by the terror of being alone, what truths are we willing to sacrifice on that altar? Have you ever sat in a meeting, a classroom, or even a casual conversation with friends, watching a clear and obvious truth be trampled by a collective, unanimous error, and found your own voice trapped in your throat? You saw the mistake, a glaring fact bending under the weight of the group's will. Yet you said nothing. A part of you, an ancient and powerful part, calculated the social cost of dissent and found the price of being right too high. You are not weak. You are not a coward. You are simply human, acting on an instinct forged in the fires of our deep past. This is the silent, powerful pull of groupthink, a testament to the fact that our brain often prioritizes belonging over being right. To understand this peculiar flaw in our wiring, we must travel back through millennia. Picture our ancestors on the vast, unforgiving savanna. Survival was not an individual sport. It was a team effort. To be cast out from the tribe was not a mere social inconvenience. It was a death sentence. A lone hominid was a vulnerable hominid, exposed to predators, starvation, and the elements. In this world, the greatest risk was not being wrong about the shape of a cloud or the origin of a sound. The greatest risk was isolation. The brain, that magnificent and pragmatic organ, learned this lesson well. It evolved to value cohesion, to seek the safety of the herd with a desperation that trumped mere factual accuracy. Agreement was the glue that held the tribe together, and the brain became a master craftsman of that glue, rewarding us with feelings of comfort and acceptance when we went along, and punishing us with spikes of anxiety when we stood apart. The question shifted from what is true to a far more primal and urgent one: where is my tribe, and am I still with them? Modern psychology has given a name and a shape to this ancient dance of conformity. The most striking illustration comes from the elegant, unsettling experiments of Solomon Asch in the 1950s. Imagine you are a participant. You are shown a simple line and asked to match it to one of three other lines of clearly different lengths. The task is absurdly simple, a test a child could pass. You are seated at a table with several other participants, unaware that they are all actors in league with the experimenter. One by one they give their answer, and one by one they all confidently choose the same, blatantly incorrect line. The pressure in the room becomes a tangible thing, a thick, silent fog. It is your turn. Your eyes see the truth, a fact as plain as day. But your brain, that ancient vulture, whispers of a different kind of danger. The danger of being the outlier, the odd one out, the disruptor. A staggering number of people, under this social pressure, folded. They denied the evidence of their own senses to utter the same falsehood as the group, their voices often tinged with doubt and discomfort. They chose belonging over reality. We now can peer inside the skull and watch this conflict play out in real time. Neuroimaging studies reveal that when we go against the group, when we dare to state an unpopular fact, it triggers a flare of activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell for threat and fear. Simultaneously, the regions associated with navigating our social world, like the medial prefrontal cortex, go into overdrive, frantically calculating the social stakes. It is a neural civil war. The part of the brain that knows the right answer battles the part that knows the right people. The pathway of least resistance, the one that quietens the alarm and soothes the social calculator, is simply to agree, to conform, to belong. The brain, in its quest for safety, willingly edits our perception of reality, making the group's error seem just a little more plausible, a little less wrong, to make the act of compliance easier on our psyche. Is our perception of the world nothing more than a temporary truce between what our eyes see and what our tribe expects us to see? This instinct is not confined to a psychologist's laboratory. It is the invisible current shaping the rivers of our modern world. Scroll through the fevered swamps of social media, and you see it everywhere. The rapid formation of ideological tribes, the ruthless silencing of dissenting voices with a wave of outrage, the performance of agreed-upon opinions becoming a new form of social currency. In corporate boardrooms, a brilliant junior analyst might bite their tongue as a flawed project gains momentum, championed by senior executives. The cost of speaking up, being seen as negative, not a team player, feels more immediate and certain than the abstract future cost of the project's failure. In politics, entire nations can march in lockstep into disastrous decisions, the drumbeat of consensus drowning out the lone voices of warning. The mechanism is always the same. The modern human, for all our technology and sophistication, is still running on ancient software. Before our conscious mind can formulate the logical argument, our primal brain has already asked the two foundational questions. Am I in? And am I safe? The question of am I correct is often a distant third. This deep-seated drive for cohesion is a double-edged sword. It is the cradle of our culture and the glue of our communities. It allows for cooperation on a massive scale, building cities and civilizations. It gives us comfort and identity. Yet that same impulse can become a club, used to enforce conformity and stifle the innovation that comes from dissent. It can make us the dutiful citizen and the pliable follower, the team player and the unthinking conformist. We are protected by the group, but we are also vulnerable to its whims, susceptible to being led by anyone who skillfully mimics the signals of tribal leadership. The very instinct that once saved us from predators on the savanna now leaves us prey to demagogues and algorithms that expertly mimic the approving hum of the tribe. So where does that leave our individual voice, that spark of unique perception? Is it the sacred flame of truth? Or is it merely a dangerous spark that threatens to burn down the village that keeps us safe? And if our own minds are so eager to silence us for the sake of harmony, is it any wonder we are so often plagued by a sense of unease, a constant low hum of anxiety about our place in the world? What if this same ancient need to belong is the very root of the modern prison of our own thoughts? You're about to speak up in a meeting, a new idea forming on your tongue, but then a shadow falls. A silent calculation runs in the back of your mind. What will they think? The words dissolve before they can be born. This is not a modern failure of nerve. It is an ancient whisper, a relic etched into the very folds of your brain. It is the voice of your ancestors, and they are terrified of being cast out. To understand this deep-seated fear, we must travel back to a world without concrete walls or digital networks. Our first home was the social group, a loose tribe of primates huddled together on a vast and dangerous savanna. In that world, survival was not an individual sport. It was a collective bargain. Strength lay in numbers, in shared vigilance against predators, in cooperative foraging and grooming. But this safety net came at a cost. The price was conformity. To be different was to be a liability. A strange cry could attract a leopard. A refusal to share food could fracture the group's fragile unity. An individual who consistently failed to read the social cues, who challenged the dominant hierarchy too brazenly, faced a fate worse than any big cat: ostracism. Exile was a death sentence. This is the primal stage upon which our social anxiety was first performed. Within this ancient theater, a powerful cognitive tool evolved: social self-monitoring. It is the mental software that runs constantly in the background, a silent observer tracking our position within the tribe. It is the part of you that notices a slight frown on a friend's face, that adjusts your tone of voice to match the mood of the room, that tells you a joke might not land well. This ability to see ourselves through the eyes of others is the very bedrock of human empathy, cooperation, and culture. It is what allows us to build societies, to coordinate complex tasks, to offer comfort. It is the glue that holds us together. We are because we belong. Yet this same brilliant adaptation has a darker twin. The neural circuitry that allows for empathy also allows for paralyzing self-consciousness. The amygdala, our brain's ancient alarm bell, once tuned to the snap of a twig or the rustle of grass, is now exquisitely sensitive to the subtlest signs of social threat. A sarcastic comment is its snarl, a dismissive glance is its charge, a silent room after you've spoken is its terrifying roar. Our modern world, with its sprawling cities and endless digital audiences, is a constant, overwhelming safari. We navigate not one tribe, but dozens simultaneously: our family, our co-workers, our online followers, the strangers on the subway. Each group has its own unwritten rules, its own shifting norms. And so, the social self-monitoring system, designed for a small tribe, is thrust into a state of perpetual overload. It begins to misfire, sounding alarms where there is no real danger. We walk into a party and feel the weight of invisible judgments. We hesitate to send a text, parsing every word for potential misunderstanding. We rehearse conversations that will never happen, preparing for critiques that exist only in our minds. We are performing a one-person play of social acceptance and rejection on a loop, every single day. The mind becomes a courtroom where we are both the accused and the terrified jury, perpetually on trial for crimes against an invisible social code. We are, in a very real sense, haunted by the ghost of a leopard that isn't there, fleeing from a punishment that never comes. This leaves us in a profound and paradoxical bind. The very instrument that grants us the profound joy of connection, the comfort of belonging, is also the chain that keeps us from our own authentic voice. It polices our thoughts, censors our ideas, and smothers our weirdness in the name of safety. It is the cradle that nurtured our species, and the cage we must learn to recognize. We are caught between the deep biological imperative to be part of the whole and the fierce human yearning to be our unique self. So where does that leave the idea you didn't share? Was it a necessary act of social preservation, a wise listening to the old ways? Or was it a silent surrender to an ancient fear, the clipping of your own wings to fit a cage that vanished millennia ago? If this intricate mental machinery for social survival is so powerful, so dominant in shaping our perceptions, then what does it mean for our search for something as pure and unemotional as truth? for we are also the ape that looked at the stars and dared to ask why. You don't remember the quadratic formula, the one you spent weeks memorizing in high school. Its precise, elegant symmetry has evaporated, leaving behind only a faint, ghostly outline of anxiety. But you can recount in vivid and embarrassing detail the office gossip you overheard this morning. You can weave a compelling narrative about who said what, why they said it, and what it might mean for the promotion you're both after. This isn't a personal failing. It is the ancient, humming machinery of your mind operating exactly as evolution intended. Your brain, the legacy of a lying ape, is not a calculator. It is a storyteller. This organ inside your skull was not designed for cold, impartial computation. It was forged in the fires of the savanna, a social landscape far more complex and dangerous than any mathematical equation. Its primary function was not to find truth, but to ensure survival. And survival, for a fragile, slow, and clawless primate, depended entirely on belonging to a group. Exile was a death sentence. So, the brain evolved its most powerful tool, the ability to construct, to narrate, and to persuade. It is built not to calculate, but to recreate, to build a version of reality and then convince others of its validity. Its genius lies in connection, not correction, in narrative, not numbers. Consider the world it had to navigate. It was a world of fleeting shadows in the grass, of ambiguous sounds in the night. Was that the wind rustling the leaves, or a leopard stalking its prey? The creature that waited for definitive proof, for the full data set, was often the one removed from the gene pool. The survivor was the one who could take a half-glimpsed shape, a snapped twig, the alarm call of a bird, and spin them into a coherent, cautionary tale. If this, then that. This ability to chain events together, to infer intention, to imagine a future that hasn't happened yet, this is the hallmark of the human mind. We call it reasoning, but its roots are deeply, profoundly theatrical. It is a dress rehearsal for life-or-death scenarios played out on the stage of the mind. This skill, this relentless narrative engine, is what set Homo sapiens apart. It wasn't our strength or our speed, but our capacity for shared fiction. We could huddle together and not just say, "There is a lion by the river." We could say, "The lion by the river is the spirit of our ancestor, and it is angry because we broke a taboo." This second statement is a revolution. It binds individuals together with the invisible glue of a common belief, a shared story. It creates roles, rules, and meaning. The individual who could craft the most compelling, cohesive, and socially useful narrative didn't just survive. They ascended. They became the central node in the social network, the keeper of the myths, the shaper of the tribe's reality. Their power came not from brute force, but from rhetorical force. And so, this legacy is our inheritance. We are not the descendants of the most accurate apes, but of the most persuasive ones. This explains the chasm between the world as it is and the world as we tell it. From the fake news that spreads like wildfire across digital networks to the curated narratives of our social media lives, from the comforting stories of our political tribes to the fallible, malleable nature of our own memories, they all spring from this same source. Our memory is not a perfect recording device. It is a storytelling organ, constantly editing and rewriting the past to better suit the narrative of our present. We prioritize a key, compelling story over an accurate fact because for hundreds of thousands of years, the compelling story was the more valuable asset. A cohesive identity within the tribe was a greater key to survival than a perfectly factual map of the territory. Is it any wonder we cling to our fictions long after the facts have proven them false? This deep-seated need to narrativize is both our greatest gift and our most profound vulnerability. It allows us to plan, to dream, to empathize, and to build civilizations. But it also makes us susceptible to conspiracy theories, to prejudice, and to believing what feels true rather than what is demonstrably real. We see patterns in randomness and agency in accident because a brain that tells stories would always rather be wrong than be silent. Is the universe a cold, chaotic place of random events, or a grand, unfolding story? Perhaps we are simply incapable of perceiving it as the former, forever compelled to project the latter upon its blank canvas. And then, one evening, deep in our prehistory, something new emerged from this storytelling mind. Around a flickering fire, safe from the darkness, the stories began to change. They were no longer just about the day's hunt or the location of water. They began to speak of things unseen. The first shaman, the first artist, picked up a piece of ochre and drew not just an animal, but a spirit, a symbol. That simple act was a cognitive Big Bang. It was the mind turning inward and outward simultaneously, using its narrative power to point beyond the tangible world. The story became a bridge to the invisible. This was the birth of a new reality, a symbolic realm parallel to the physical one. Language evolved from describing immediate needs to conveying abstract concepts: justice, love, the soul. A painted bison on a cave wall was no longer just a depiction. It was a prayer, a prophecy, a vessel for power. Art, ritual, and spirituality blossomed from this same profound source. The ape that could not stop telling stories began to tell stories about itself, its origins, and its place in the cosmos. The mind, having mastered the narrative of survival, now dared to author a narrative of meaning. We had used stories to map the social world, and then we used them to map the spiritual one. We created gods, myths, and art, the ultimate expressions of our narrative hunger. But in doing so, did we discover a deeper layer of reality? Or did we merely project our own deepest hopes and fears onto the void? Did we step into a new world of meaning? Or did we simply build a more elaborate and beautiful cage made of stories, a cage so vast we mistake it for the sky? A horse, outlined in ochre and shadow, gallops across a cold cave wall. A hand, pressed against rock, is forever stained with a spray of red pigment. These are not mere marks. They are messages cast across a chasm of 40,000 years. Our ancestors painted before they could write, sculpted forms before they could build permanent homes. They were not just surviving, they were speaking. But to whom? And for what urgent, inexplicable reason? The act itself seems a paradox, a tremendous expenditure of precious energy and focus in a world defined by scarcity, all for something that offers no immediate warmth, no shelter, no nourishment. It is the first great mystery of the human mind, a spark in the dark that would eventually ignite a universe within us. This emergence, this cognitive leap, did not happen in an empty world. It was the culmination of a slow, grinding pressure. For millions of years, our lineage had been tool users, shaping stones into sharper edges, turning bone into levers. But these were extensions of the hand, designed for a single physical purpose: to cut, to scrape, to dig. The world they inhabited was one of direct cause and effect. Then, gradually, the architecture of the brain began to shift. In the fertile neural landscapes of the left hemisphere, regions now known as Broca's and Wernicke's areas began to swell with new potential. This was not merely an upgrade for better tool-making. It was the biological foundation for a new kind of tool. This tool could model the world not in stone, but in sound and symbol. It could take the internal, private movie of a thought, the memory of a migrating herd, the strategy for an ambush, the fear of a predator's eyes in the dark, and give it a shape that could be passed to another mind. Language was born not as a social nicety, but as a revolutionary technology for sharing consciousness itself. And with language came its silent twin, the symbol. A painted bison is not a bison. It is a representation, an idea of a bison. It holds within it the memory of past hunts and the potential for future feasts. It is a prayer, a story, a piece of knowledge made solid. This ability to let one thing stand for another, a sound for an object, a mark for a concept, is perhaps the most profound mutation the human mind ever underwent. It allowed for the storage of information outside the fragile biology of the brain. Knowledge could now accumulate across generations, no longer dying with its owner. A culture, a shared set of beliefs and stories, could be woven together, creating a fabric of meaning that bound individuals into something larger and more resilient than any mere troop of primates. This was the true birth of the tribe, not as a genetic unit, but as a symbolic one, united by a common story about who they were and why they were here. We are the inheritors of that symbolic revolution, living in a world utterly saturated by its products. The brands we loyalty to, the flags we salute, the digital avatars we curate, the currencies we trust. These are all direct descendants of that handprint on the cave wall. They are shared fictions, powerful because we collectively believe in their power. Our modern myths are broadcast on screens instead of told around fires, but they fulfill the same ancient, deep-seated need to belong, to understand, and to project order onto the beautiful chaos of existence. We are still using symbols to build our tribes, to navigate the social world, and to answer the big, haunting questions that our expanding consciousness cannot help but ask. Are we not then still painting our own horses on the walls of a digital cave, seeking connection across a new kind of darkness? This explosion of abstract thought, this flowering of art and language, required fuel. A brain capable of such complex, energy-intensive processes is a costly organ to run. It demands a steady, rich supply of calories to power its dense networks of neurons. The body could not have allocated such resources without a fundamental change in how we interacted with the world around us. The key was not found in a new kind of weapon or a better way to gather berries. It was found in the most primal and transformative force nature had to offer. It was the harnessing of a wild, dancing element that already shaped the world around them, forging landscapes with lightning strikes, offering warmth and terror in equal measure. The greatest tool was not held in the hand, but was the hand's extension to control the uncontrollable. And so, the most important tool emerged: fire. It did more than just cook meat, tenderizing tough fibers and unlocking calories that were once locked away, effectively giving our bodies an external stomach that pre-digested our food. It did more than provide warmth, allowing us to venture into colder climates and extend our dominion over the earth. It pushed back the absolute darkness, carving out a circle of safety and light from the oppressive, predator-filled night. This circle of flickering flame became the first classroom, the first theater, the first council chamber. The shadows it cast on the cave walls were the first canvases, and the extended days it created offered time not just for rest, but for something new. As stomachs were filled more efficiently with cooked food, and as the night's dangers were held at bay, the mind was gifted something invaluable: leisure. Not idleness, but a space free from the immediate, grinding demands of survival. In that space, fueled by a better diet and protected by the flame, the brain found its catalyst. The conversations could grow longer, the stories more elaborate, the plans more intricate. The imagination, no longer wholly occupied with the pursuit of the next meal, could wander. It could play. It could remember the day's events and rehearse for tomorrow's possibilities. It could look at the embers and see the sun, or a spirit, or the glow of a distant idea. Fire, in its literal and metaphorical heat, cooked the world around us, but it also cooked the very structure of the brain, accelerating its evolution at a pace never before seen in the history of life. It transformed us from clever apes into storytellers, symbol weavers, and world builders. But if fire provided the fuel and the space for this explosion of thought, what was the furnace itself? If the flame set the stage, what was the internal machinery that began to spin these flickering perceptions into the enduring tapestries of art, language, and technology? The mind had been given a new kind of nourishment and a safe place to consume it. What new circuits began to fire in that protective glow, weaving individual sparks of insight into the sustained blaze of imagination? Imagine a creature, not so different from the others in its forest, stumbling upon the aftermath of a lightning strike. The air still hums with a strange energy, and a low orange glow pulses from a blackened log. This is not the terrifying, all-consuming wall of flame from a wildfire. This is something contained, manageable. A curious hand, guided by an instinct it does not yet understand, prods the ember with a stick. It is hot, it is dangerous, but it is also useful. This ape, our distant ancestor, does not just flee. It learns to keep the glow alive, to feed it, to carry it, and in doing so, it does something that had never before occurred on this planet. It creates a meal, a campsite, a future that is not dictated solely by the rising and setting of the sun. This was the first great divorce from the natural order. Before fire, evolution was a conversation between a creature and its environment, a slow, grinding process of adaptation. An animal reacted. It found shelter from the storm. It fled from the predator. It foraged for what the seasons provided. But fire was different. It was the first tool that allowed for not just reaction, but active, deliberate transformation of the immediate world. It was a technology. Combined with the burgeoning skill of crafting stone tools, the human brain began a fundamental shift. It moved from a processor of the present to a simulator of futures. It was no longer just about what is, but what could be. And with that, imagination was crowned the new ruler of the mind. The evidence of this shift is written in our very biology. The act of cooking food was a revolution inside our bodies. A raw tuber is a challenge to digest, a tough, fibrous package that demands long, energy-intensive processing in the gut. But apply flame, and its cellular walls break down, pre-digesting the starches and proteins, unlocking a torrent of calories that were previously inaccessible. This external stomach, the fire, fundamentally altered our physiological economy. The massive calorie-hungry gut that other primates require could now shrink. That freed up energy, a sudden and immense metabolic surplus, was diverted to a new, even more ravenous organ, the brain. This is the beautiful pragmatic trade-off written in our bones and our genes. We traded internal complexity for mental complexity. We outsourced digestion to the hearth, and in return, we purchased the neural real estate for thought. And what thought it was. The making of a tool, a simple sharpened stone, is an act of profound abstraction. It requires holding an image in the mind, the finished hand axe, and then executing a series of precise planned strikes on a raw cobble to achieve that vision. It is a physical manifestation of cause and effect, of planning and foresight. The toolmaker must see the future in the present stone. This cognitive leap, this dance between the hand, the eye, and the mind's eye, forged new neural pathways. It demanded a new kind of memory, one that could recall not just locations of food, but complex sequences of action. It demanded a new kind of communication, to teach these delicate skills to the next generation. Each struck flake was a lesson in physics, each successful tool, a theorem in utility. The brain was no longer just navigating the world, it was beginning to model it, to manipulate its underlying principles. We can see the long shadow of that first controlled spark in every facet of our modern existence. The gentle click of a gas stove igniting a blue ring of flame is a direct descendant of that primordial campfire. The smartphone in your hand is not a rock, but it is a tool, an externalized extension of our memory, our social networks, our capacity to calculate and communicate. The smart home that adjusts its temperature, the city that pulses with electric light, the global network that allows ideas to flash across the planet in milliseconds. These are not mere adaptations. They are a continuous, accelerating process of world building. We have moved from simply finding shelter to constructing entirely new ecosystems of our own design. We are no longer creatures merely living in an environment. We are architects, forever remodeling the very cradle that gave us birth. Our tools have become the brushes with which we paint reality itself. Yet herein lies the profound and unsettling paradox. The very engine of our success, this magnificent, imaginative, tool-creating brain has begun to generate a world that operates at a velocity its own biology cannot match. Evolution shaped our minds for the savanna, for small tribes, for immediate threats and seasonal rhythms. It equipped us with a nervous system fine-tuned to the sudden snarl of a predator, not the constant low-grade alarm of 100 daily notifications. The brain that could imagine carrying a firebrand across miles of terrain is the same brain that now must grapple with the abstract existential threats of climate change or global financial markets. We built a world of relentless change, but we are still housed in a mind that craves stability, pattern, and meaning. The tool has outpaced the toolmaker. So we stand today, the heirs of that first flame, in cities that never sleep, connected to a digital nervous system that spans the globe. We possess godlike powers of creation and destruction, yet we are governed by the ancient, often tribal emotions of the ape that first nurtured a spark in the darkness. We have used our imagination to build a habitat of staggering complexity. But does the architecture of our own mind, forged in a simpler, slower time, contain the blueprint to navigate it? The fire we learned to keep now flickers on a billion screens, and the future it illuminates is one we are still learning to see. Imagine for a moment the world your brain was built for. It is a world of rustling savanna grasses and the deep, damp coolness of a limestone cave. The social circle is a small, intimate constellation of faces, perhaps 150 souls, each one known by name, by story, by kinship. Your greatest fears are the silhouette of a predator against the moon and the quiet disapproval of your tribe. Your greatest joys are the shared warmth of a fire and the safety of the known. This is the cradle. This is home. Now open your eyes to the world you actually inhabit. A concourse of strangers flows around you, a river of 9 million individual stories, each a universe of joy and sorrow you will never know. Your pocket vibrates with the anxieties of a colleague on another continent, while a screen floods your vision with the curated perfection of 1,000 strangers' lives. The predator's silhouette has been replaced by the flicker of a stock market ticker. The tribe's disapproval has morphed into the silent judgment of a missed notification. The cave is gone. In its place stands a city of steel and glass, a monument to a progress so dizzying it has left the very organ that conceived it, the human brain, stumbling in its wake. This is the central paradox of our modern existence. We are ancient hardware running the most advanced software ever written. Our biological evolution is a stately geological process, measured in millennia. It takes thousands of years for a subtle shift in our DNA to confer some slight advantage. Yet our cultural and technological evolution moves at the speed of thought, compressing revolutions, agricultural, industrial, digital, into mere centuries, even decades. We leapt from the campfire to the cloud in a blink of evolutionary time. We designed a world of overwhelming abundance and complexity, but we forgot to check if the user was compatible. We are now living in the future, but we brought our Stone Age brains with us. This dissonance is perhaps most acutely felt in the realm of human connection. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed a number, a cognitive limit to the number of stable relationships we can maintain. The Dunbar number, roughly 150, is not about casual acquaintances or familiar faces, but about people you know well enough to understand their social bonds and feel a genuine sense of obligation toward. This number is not arbitrary. It is etched into the architecture of our neocortex, a limit set by the processing power required to track the intricate web of who likes whom, who owes what, and who can be trusted. For most of human history, this number was our entire world, a village that was our cradle, our club, our everything. But then, we built the digital village. With a few clicks, we can now know thousands. Our social media feeds become a cavalcade of faces, a childhood friend, a vague work contact, a celebrity, a politician, a person we met once at a conference. Our limbic system, the ancient emotional core of the brain that handles bonding and threat detection, is suddenly bombarded with a fire hose of social information it was never designed to process. It is asked to care about the vacation photos of a distant acquaintance with the same primal intensity it once reserved for the well-being of its kin. It is asked to parse the nuanced social cues of a text message without the benefit of tone, of touch, of shared physical space. The system is overloaded. The circuit hums with a constant, low-grade alarm. So when you feel that vague sense of social exhaustion after scrolling through your phone, that paradoxical loneliness in a crowd of digital connections, it is not a personal failing. It is not a sign that you are antisocial or weak. It is a physiological response. It is the deep, ancient parts of your brain sending up a flare of confusion, asking a simple, plaintive question it cannot answer. Who is my tribe? Where is my fire? The feeling of being simultaneously connected to everyone and truly known by no one is the direct result of a system operating far beyond its design specifications. We have given ourselves the gift of infinite connection, only to watch it curdle into a constant, low-grade anxiety. Is this the price of the global village? A sense of belonging that is a mile wide and an inch deep? This cognitive overload extends beyond mere social circles into the very fabric of reality we consume. Our brain, a masterpiece of pattern recognition honed over eons to spot berries in a thicket or predators in the tall grass, is now set loose in an infinite digital thicket of information. It is drowning in data. It is presented with competing narratives about health, politics, economics, and identity, each backed by its own set of facts and figures. This is a world of radical truth, of unbearable complexity. And the brain, this beautiful, outdated machine, was never programmed for this. It was programmed for survival. It was programmed for efficiency. Faced with a tsunami of information, it does not calmly and logically evaluate each wave. It does what it has always done. It seeks a life raft. It seeks simplicity. It seeks coherence. It seeks comfort. It begins instinctively to gravitate towards information that feels familiar, that confirms what it already suspects, that aligns with the worldview of its tribe, even if that tribe is now a digital echo chamber rather than a physical village. The mental shortcuts that once helped us avoid poisonous berries and dangerous animals now lead us to swallow convenient fictions and reject uncomfortable truths. The brain, overwhelmed, starts to choose stories over facts, simplicity over complexity, the familiar lie over the Moshang truth. So what truly happens when an instrument of survival, a brain built for the concrete immediacy of the tangible world, is forced to navigate the abstract, overwhelming labyrinth of modern information? What compromises does it make? What shortcuts does it take to build a coherent story out of the chaos, and in doing so, what reality does it ultimately create for itself? Does the mind, in its desperate search for solid ground in a quicksand of data, simply end up building its own cage? Have you ever found yourself scrolling through an article, a news feed, or a scientific paper, not with an open mind, but with a silent, desperate hope? A hope that the next paragraph, the next statistic, will finally be the one that proves you right. That your political stance is the moral one. That your investment was shrewd. That the person who hurt you truly is to blame. This isn't a simple act of laziness. It is something far more ancient, far more ingrained. It is the default setting of the primate brain, a deeply wired instinct to seek not the truth, but the comfort of the familiar. It is the engine of confirmation bias, and it runs in the background of every thought we have. To understand this pull, we must step out of our information-saturated world and into our deep past. Imagine the African savanna millions of years ago. For our early ancestors, survival was not a solo endeavor. It was a tightrope walk strung between the towering trees of a social group. Your place in the tribe was your life insurance, your shared beliefs, your common myths, your unified distrust of that rival band over the hill. These were the bonds that held the community together. To suddenly change your belief, to question a shared assumption, was not a sign of intellectual bravery. It was a dangerous act of social rebellion. It could mean alienation. And alienation, in a world of predators and scarce resources, was a death sentence. The brain, therefore, evolved not as a perfect logic machine, but as a social survival tool. Its primary goal was to maintain cohesion, to preserve the status quo, to hold fast to the map of reality the tribe had given you, even if the territory had begun to shift. Changing your mind was a cognitive luxury our ancestors could seldom afford. This ancient wiring manifests in our modern skulls as a systematic and often invisible filtering process. Confirmation bias is the technical term for this relentless mental curator. It is our tendency to actively seek, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms or supports our pre-existing beliefs, values, or hypotheses. Simultaneously, and just as importantly, we ignore, dismiss, or argue against evidence that contradicts them. Neuroscientists have peered inside the brain during this process and found something revealing. When a person encounters information that aligns with their worldview, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a region intimately tied to processing rewards and feelings of value, lights up with activity. It is a small neural celebration. The brain, quite literally, gives itself a chemical pat on the back for finding what it was looking for. The comforting thought is registered not just as correct, but as valuable, rewarding, good. Conversely, contradictory information can trigger activity in the amygdala and anterior insula, areas associated with negative emotions like fear, disgust, and pain. To the brain, being wrong doesn't feel like an opportunity to learn. It feels on a primal level like a threat. We see the fingerprints of this bias everywhere, coloring the vast and the intimate scales of human life. In politics, we gravitate toward news outlets that affirm our team's righteousness and our opponent's folly, creating parallel universes of fact. In religion, faith is often strengthened not by questioning, but by seeking the divine in ways that reaffirm its presence. In our personal lives, we cling to the first impression of a colleague, selectively noting every minor mistake that proves our initial judgment of their incompetence, while effortlessly forgetting their many successes. An investor holds on to a failing stock, cherry-picking any sliver of hopeful news while a mountain of bad data piles up beside them. A heartbroken person revisits every past interaction, not to understand what went wrong, but to gather evidence that they were never truly loved. In each case, the mind is not on a quest for objective truth. It is on a pilgrimage to a shrine of its own making, seeking the spiritual comfort of validation. We build fortresses of our convictions, stone by selected stone, each piece of confirming evidence mortared into place with the satisfying certainty of being right. The windows are narrow, designed not to let in light, but to offer a specific, curated view. We stand guard on the battlements, dismissing contradictory evidence as mere stray arrows that clatter harmlessly against the walls. The fortress makes us feel safe, powerful, and unassailable. But what is the cost of this safety? What happens when the world outside changes and our fortress becomes not a stronghold, but a prison? What happens when the brain, in its desperate quest for the reward of being right, chooses a path that is profoundly wrong, yet holds on to that belief with unshakable, devout certainty? The neural reward for confirmation feels so real, so true. But is the feeling of being right the same thing as being right? And if our mind is so adept at shaping reality to fit our beliefs, what strange alchemy then allows a single, shocking event, a vivid story, a traumatic moment, a sensational headline, to bypass all our careful filters and burn itself permanently onto the fabric of our memory? Why does a compelling narrative, true or not, often hold more power over us than 1,000 mundane facts? You remember the sensational crime from a decade ago in vivid detail, the chilling headline, the suspect's face, the twist in the narrative. Yet, the historical facts you diligently studied yesterday for that important meeting have already begun to fade, their edges blurring into a fog of forgotten dates and names. This isn't a failure of your intellect or a sign of a poor memory. It is, instead, the quiet, efficient operation of an ancient survival mechanism. Your brain does not prioritize truth. It prioritizes potential danger. It holds on to what shocks, terrifies, and unsettles us, treating these visceral impressions as vital data for survival, while the calm, neutral facts of reality are often left by the wayside, deemed less urgent for immediate survival. This preference for the sensational is a deep-seated inheritance, a ghost in the neural machinery passed down from our earliest ancestors. Their world was not one of abstract information and digital news feeds, but a tangible landscape of immediate threats and fleeting opportunities. For them, forgetting the location of a fresh water source was an inconvenience. Forgetting the specific gory details of a rival's fate at the claws of a predator or the subtle signs of betrayal within the tribe was a fatal mistake. The brain became a museum of horrors, meticulously cataloging every grim exhibit, the chilling sound that preceded an attack, the visual cue of a poisonous plant, the scent of decay that signaled disease. These were not stories. They were survival manuals written in the stark ink of fear and adrenaline. Information that caused a visceral reaction that stirred a profound emotional response was branded into memory because it was almost always linked to a genuine existential threat. The mundane, the peaceful, the ordinary. These were the background noise of a safe moment, and safe moments were a luxury to be enjoyed, not a lesson to be meticulously memorized. This ancient curation process is governed by a powerful piece of neural architecture, the amygdala. When we encounter something shocking, frightening, or emotionally charged, this almond-shaped cluster of neurons sounds the alarm, triggering a cascade of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical bath does more than just prepare the body to fight or flee. It acts as a highlighter for the brain. It tells the hippocampus, the region responsible for forming new memories. This is important. Pay attention. Burn this into the record. A neutral fact, the capital of a distant country, the date of a treaty, triggers no such response. It is processed through calmer pathways, often failing to secure a permanent foothold. But a gruesome image, a tale of betrayal, a shocking scandal, these are granted privileged status, etched into our neural circuits with far greater durability. It is a system optimized for survival in a world of immediate physical peril, not for navigating the complex, information-saturated world we inhabit today. And so, we find ourselves in the modern age, wielding a Stone Age brain in a digital world. The same mechanisms that once seared the memory of a saber-toothed tiger's snarl into our ancestors' minds now latch onto the digital equivalents. The negative news headlines screaming from a screen, the social media drama dripping with outrage, the shocking rumor that spreads like wildfire through a community. These modern threats are not physical, but our neural apparatus hasn't received the update. The amygdala still fires, the hormones still flow, and the memory is cemented. A meticulously researched scientific report on climate change, a balanced political analysis, or a sober economic forecast, devoid of visceral shock, struggles to compete for our cognitive bandwidth. We are, in a sense, haunted by the ghosts of threats that are no longer there. Our attention captured by the sensational echoes of dangers our biology is primed to expect. This neural bias has profound consequences, moving far beyond simple recollection into the very core of our judgment and decision-making. When our store of most readily available memories is disproportionately filled with shocking, negative, or fear-based information, it shapes our perception of reality. We begin to overestimate risks that are lurid and rare, like plane crashes or violent crimes, while underestimating more common but less sensational dangers, like heart disease or car accidents. Our worldview becomes a funhouse mirror, distorted by the vivid and the traumatic. We make financial choices based on the memory of a past market crash. We form political opinions based on a handful of scandalous anecdotes, and we judge entire groups of people based on isolated, horrific events amplified by media. The lopsided archive in our minds, curated by an ancient fear, begins to dictate our modern logic. We believe we are rational actors, carefully weighing evidence to arrive at sound conclusions. But what if the very evidence we weigh is pre-filtered by a primordial fear? What if our most trusted memories are, in fact, the least trustworthy guides for the complex world we now navigate? The club that once protected us from predators may now be the very thing we swing at shadows, mistaking them for threats. The cradle of our survival may now be constraining our growth. If our deepest instincts for what is important are fundamentally misaligned with the truth of our environment, how can we ever hope to see the world clearly? And what does it mean for our future when our most powerful decisions are so often made by the most ancient part of ourselves, a part that still listens for the rustle in the grass and mistakes the evening news for a predator's growl? This leaves us at a precipice, staring into a fundamental disconnect. The very tool we use to understand the world, our own remembered experience, is inherently biased toward the sensational and the scary. We are left to wonder, if our memory is not a faithful archivist of truth, but a paranoid survivalist collecting threats, then who or what is truly in charge of our choices? Have you ever clicked buy now in a flash of inspiration, or cast a vote swept up in a wave of emotion, only to later construct a perfectly logical fortress of reasons to defend that initial, impulsive choice? If so, you are not failing at being human. You are succeeding at it. This is not a personal flaw, but an ancient strategy, a relic of survival etched into the very architecture of your mind. The quick emotional decision arrived first, a silent command from the depths. The reasoned argument, the eloquent justification, arrived later, a skilled lawyer hired after the fact to plead the case of a client whose guilt is already certain. We like to imagine our brain as a wise, impartial judge, carefully weighing evidence on the scales of reason before delivering a verdict. But this is a comforting fiction. The truth is far more intriguing and unsettling. The brain is not a dispassionate arbiter of truth. It is a storyteller, a brilliant, relentless, and sometimes devious narrator that observes our actions, our gut feelings, our snap judgments, and then weaves them into a coherent, logical-sounding story. It provides the script for the play after the actors have already performed. It rationalizes. It explains. It makes sense of the chaos, ensuring that we see ourselves not as creatures of whim, but as characters of purpose and logic. This narrator is so convincing that we, the audience of our own lives, are almost always fooled by its tale. This profound insight into our own psychology is illuminated by the pioneering work of psychologists like Daniel Kahneman. He gave us a map of the mind's duality, labeling its two systems of thinking. System 1 is the ancient part. It is fast, automatic, and emotional. It operates effortlessly, like a sophisticated pattern recognition machine running in the background. It is the gut feeling, the flinch of fear, the instant like or dislike. It is the system that recognizes a friend's face in a crowd without conscious effort, that slams on the brakes before you've even fully processed the danger ahead. It is our inner caveman, optimized for speed, not for accuracy. Then there is System 2. This is the slow, deliberate, and logical processor we identify with our conscious self. It is the voice in your head that does mental math, that puzzles over a complex instruction manual, that carefully considers the pros and cons of a difficult decision. It is powerful, but it is also lazy and easily depleted. It requires focus and energy, and crucially, it is often not the one in charge. Most of the time, System 1 is running the show, making quick calls based on shortcuts and ingrained biases. System 2 is merely called upon to endorse these decisions and dress them up in the formal attire of logic. It is the press secretary for the administration of the self, tasked with explaining policies it did not set. This internal dynamic plays out on every stage of modern life, often with significant consequences. Consider the act of purchasing. We rarely buy a product solely for its utilitarian value. We are swayed by the story it tells. A limited time offer triggers a primal fear of missing out, a relic of scarce resources. A 5-star rating from 100 strangers feels more trustworthy than a detailed spec sheet, because our tribal brains are wired to trust the consensus of the group. A familiar brand name feels like a friend, a safe harbor in a sea of uncertainty. We are not buying a tool. We are buying a narrative of security, status, or belonging, And the logical reasons, the features, the price comparison, are often just the after-the-fact justification for an emotional pull we can scarcely articulate. This theater of the mind extends far beyond the shopping cart into the most consequential arenas of our existence. In politics, we do not merely evaluate policies and platforms. We respond to candidates on a visceral level. We are drawn to charisma, to a confident tone of voice, to a narrative that resonates with our tribe's identity. We gravitate toward information that feels true because it confirms what we already believe, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. Complex economic data is filtered through a lens of emotion. A candidate's story of struggle or triumph can outweigh a decade of voting records. We are not casting a vote for a spreadsheet of policy positions. We are aligning ourselves with a tribe, a story, a feeling of safety, or change. The reasoned arguments for our chosen side are, more often than not, the elegant flags we plant on territory our emotions have already claimed. The same ancient script dictates our financial decisions. The thrill of a soaring stock price can feel like a successful hunt, triggering a rush of dopamine that overrides cautious analysis. The pain of a loss is felt more acutely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain, a bias known as loss aversion that can lead us to hold on to failing investments far too long. We see patterns in random market noise, stories of cause and effect where none exist, because our pattern-seeking brains abhor chaos. The rational investor is a modern ideal, but the reality is a prehistoric brain trying to navigate a digital marketplace, often using tools designed for spotting predators on the savanna, not trends on a chart. So if our brain is not a truth-seeking missile but a story-spinning novelist, what are we to make of our choices, our beliefs, our convictions? The unsettling realization is that we are not primarily driven by a quest for objective reality. We are driven by a quest for coherence. The human mind does not relentlessly seek what is true. It seeks what feels true. It seeks what is familiar, what is comforting, what confirms our existing worldview, and what helps us maintain a stable sense of self. It prefers a good story that fits neatly into our existing mental model over a messy, complicated truth that would force us to rebuild that model from the ground up. The brain is a master of cognitive ease, and nothing is easier than accepting a story that we have already written for ourselves. This leaves us with a quiet, humbling question, one that echoes in the space between the stories we tell ourselves and the reality we inhabit. If our most cherished convictions are often just elegant rationalizations for deeper, older instincts, then how can we ever truly know the difference between a reason and an excuse? You believe you think logically? That you observe the world, process facts, and arrive at reasoned conclusions? The truth is far more strange and beautiful. You are not a cold, impartial judge of reality. You are the audience, and your brain is a master storyteller, constantly narrating your life as a gripping, coherent novel, even when the raw material is nothing but chaos and random noise. This isn't a flaw. It is the very mechanism of consciousness, a brilliant and ancient trick that built the self, but also built the walls of a personal, inescapable prison. Our brains possess a deep biological aversion to randomness, uncertainty, and pure chaos. To a mind evolved for survival, an unexplained sound is not a curiosity. It is a potential predator. A pattern in the leaves is not an abstract arrangement. It is camouflage to be decoded. This ancient wiring leaves us with a powerful inheritance, a compulsion to weave narratives. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and in the absence of clear patterns, we will invent them. We connect dots that were never meant to be connected, crafting cause from mere correlation, intention from accident, and plot from the utterly mundane. The brain is forced to take the fragmented, disjointed sensory input of a moment, the flicker of a shadow, the tone of a voice, a fragment of a memory, and assemble it into a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The reality may be a disconnected series of events, but the story we experience is smooth, purposeful, and makes perfect sense to us. It has to. A world that makes sense is a world we can navigate, predict, and ultimately survive in. This magnificent, deceptive machinery has a physical home within the folds of our cortex. When you daydream, when you replay a conversation from yesterday, when you imagine a future yet to come, a specific network of brain regions hums with activity. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It is the brain's background rhythm, the engine that idles when no immediate external task demands our attention. But idling is a misnomer. This is when the most important work is being done. The DMN is the stage where the story of you is written and perpetually revised. It is the seat of self-referential thought, the place where memories are retrieved and woven into the ongoing narrative, where social simulations are run, and where the continuous, uninterrupted sense of being a singular, persistent entity, the self, is constructed and maintained. Without this network, our experience would be a series of disconnected, present-tense moments. With it, we have an autobiography. And so, we come to see ourselves as the protagonists of a coherent, linear story. We believe our lives possess a clear arc, that our choices are deliberate, and that our past logically and neatly leads to our present. But the raw data of a life is overwhelmingly chaotic. It is a jumble of forgotten moments, chance encounters, unintended consequences, and emotions that flare and fade for reasons we never fully grasp. To maintain the illusion of continuity, the storyteller in our head must become a ruthless editor. It selectively highlights events that fit the chosen narrative theme, the tragedy, the comedy, the redemption story, and quietly shelves the data points that don't belong. A memory that contradicts our sense of self is softened, reinterpreted, or forgotten altogether. We remember the time we stood our ground, but forget the times we acquiesced. We recall our clever retorts, not our awkward silences. This curation is not dishonest, it is necessary. It glues the shards of our experience into a whole that we can call me. But it means we are not remembering the past itself, but the last story we told about it. We are living inside a tale that is being written, edited, and rewritten in real time, mistaking the polished manuscript for the messy truth of lived experience. So, where does this leave us? If our most fundamental sense of reality is a curated fabrication, a brilliant confabulation designed for survival rather than truth, can we ever truly know ourselves or the world outside? Can we peer behind the curtain and see the stagehands at work, or are we forever bound to our seats, captivated by the show? Is it possible to transcend these ancient, necessary limits, to quiet the storyteller and perceive the world in its raw, unfiltered, and perhaps terrifying glory? Or is our only choice to learn to live gracefully within the story, to appreciate the artistry of the illusion while understanding its inherent constraints, making peace with the fact that we will never hold the absolute truth, only our own unique, flawed, and beautiful version of it? This narrator in our skull, this weaver of tales, did not emerge fully formed. It is the product of an immense evolutionary journey, a fundamental shift in the very purpose of the brain itself. What immense pressure could have transformed a simple organ of survival, concerned only with food, fear, and reproduction, into this cavernous generator of abstract thought, of art, of philosophy, of wondering about its own wondering? What was the biological leap that turned a brain that merely reacts to the world into a mind that seeks to explain it? We are the only species that looks up at the stars and asks, "Who am I? Where did I come from?" This simple act, repeated by countless generations under the same infinite canopy, is perhaps the most profound mystery of our existence. A predator's gaze is fixed on the immediate, the scent of prey, the rustle in the grass, the urgent now. But our gaze drifts upward, untethered from survival, reaching for patterns in the chaos of light. Why would a brain, forged in the relentless furnace of survival, devote precious energy to such an abstract, seemingly useless pursuit? Why did we need to wonder? This journey begins not in the lecture hall, but on the ancient savanna. Picture our ancestors, not as brutish figures, but as keenly intelligent apes navigating a world of tooth and claw. Their minds were exquisitely tuned instruments for reading intention in a predator's stare, for finding shelter in the gathering storm, for remembering the location of a single fruit tree across the changing seasons. They lived in a tight, sensory prison of the present moment. Their world was what could be seen, heard, and smelled. The future was a vague threat, the past a fading echo. Then, something shifted. A new layer of consciousness began to crystallize, a slow dawn of an inner world. We began to see ourselves from the outside, to hold a mirror up to our own minds. The brain, once a tool for reacting to the world, started to simulate it. It began to build futures that did not yet exist, and to wander through pasts that were gone. We became the self-reflecting animal. This monumental leap was not a sudden magic trick of evolution, but a gradual rewiring, centered on a specific region of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. While other primates possess this structure, in us it underwent an explosive expansion, becoming the command center for everything we consider uniquely human. This is the biological seed of imagination. It is the canvas where we paint possible tomorrows, running complex simulations of social interactions, potential dangers, and creative endeavors. It allows us to practice a speech in the quiet of our mind, to feel the pang of a future loss, to envision the shape of a tool we have not yet carved. It is the engine of restraint, weighing immediate impulses against long-term goals, the choice to save the seed for planting rather than eating it now. This neural architecture granted us a form of mental time travel, liberating us from the tyranny of the present. We could learn from mistakes that hadn't yet happened and yearn for rewards that were months away. Is this ability to hold the future in our mind the very thing that gave us a past and a future, instead of just an endless present? This newfound capacity did not replace our ancient operating system. It was built on top of it, a new application running on very old hardware. Every sophisticated human behavior, from the personal projects that give our lives meaning to the existential crises that shatter them, is a conversation and often a conflict between this new suitor, the contemplative mind, and the old master, the instinctual brain. The drive to build a career, to create art, to fall in love, all stem from our ability to project ourselves into a narrative, to imagine a version of our life that is better, richer, or different. Yet, these lofty ambitions are fueled by ancient primal engines, the need for status, a refinement of dominance hierarchies, the longing for connection, an extension of tribal bonding, the fear of mortality, the ultimate extension of a survival instinct gone self-aware. Our highest virtues and our deepest anxieties are two languages spoken by the same mind, one modern and complex, the other ancient and visceral. When we stare into the abyss of a personal crisis, are we listening to the wise elder in the prefrontal cortex, or the terrified child in the older, deeper brain? And so we arrive at the central paradox of the human condition. We possess a mind of breathtaking modernity, capable of calculus and compassion, of building particle accelerators and writing sonnets. Yet, this modern mind is housed in a body and a brainstem whose fundamental design is ancient. We are running state-of-the-art software on hardware that was last updated for life in a Pleistocene world. Our stress response, exquisitely tuned for outrunning a saber-toothed cat, is now triggered by an overflowing inbox or a harsh comment online, flooding our modern bodies with archaic hormones for a threat we cannot fight or flee. Our tribal instincts for belonging, once essential for survival in a small band, now play out on a global scale, creating polarization and conflict. Our craving for fat and sugar, a lifesaver in a world of scarcity, becomes a liability in a world of plenty. We are a living contradiction, a biological anachronism. We can envision a peaceful, sustainable future, yet we are perpetually tugged backward by the ghosts of our own evolution, by fears and desires that made sense on a savanna we no longer inhabit. If we are the architects of our future, but building with the inherited impulsive tools of our past, can we ever truly design a world that fits the grandeur of our own imagination? You scroll through a feed of global news, order groceries with a tap, and command a sphere of information that would be indistinguishable from magic to your ancestors. Yet a curt email can ruin your afternoon. A sideways glance from a stranger can trigger a spiral of self-doubt. The sight of a glazed donut behind glass can hijack your best intentions, your rational mind shouting instructions that your body simply refuses to hear. This is the central paradox of being human today, a mind racing at the speed of light, housed in a body that still believes it is wandering the savanna. We live our lives in a world of our own making, a dizzying construct of concrete, data, and social nuance. But the operating system running this sophisticated existence is ancient, a legacy software that hasn't received a major update in roughly 10,000 years. Our hardware, the brain and its hormonal cascades, the nervous system wired for immediate threat, was forged in a crucible of scarcity and immediate physical danger. It is a masterpiece of adaptation for a world that no longer exists. Every heartbeat, every surge of adrenaline, every craving for fat and sugar was once a feature, not a bug. They were the tools that ensured survival long enough to pass on the very genes that coded for them. Now these tools feel increasingly like burdens, a set of instincts spectacularly mismatched to the complexities of modern life. This profound disconnect is described by a powerful concept: evolutionary mismatch. It is the chasm between the world we evolved for, our environment of evolutionary adaptedness, EEA, and the world we have built. Imagine a fish, exquisitely evolved for the pressures and currents of the deep ocean, suddenly placed in a glass tank. It is safe from predators, fed reliably, and yet it may swim in frantic, repetitive circles. It is not broken. It is simply responding to a world its body does not understand. We are that fish. Our instincts are the ocean currents we still expect to feel. Our stress, our anxieties, our cravings are the frantic swimming in the environment that provides survival, but often at the cost of profound psychological dissonance. Consider the sweet, ripe fruit that was a rare and precious source of energy for our foraging ancestors. Finding it was a cause for celebration, a metabolic windfall. The brain, in its wisdom, rewarded this discovery with a hit of dopamine, cementing the behavior. Seek this out. It is good. Fast forward to now. That same neurological reward system, that same powerful craving, is triggered not by a rare discovery, but by a vending machine, a drive-through, an entire aisle of the supermarket. Our bodies, still believing in the scarcity of calories, urge us to consume, to store, to prepare for a famine that never comes. The result is not a failure of willpower, but a triumph of an ancient instinct in a context it was never designed to navigate. Similarly, our threat detection system is a relic that has become a tyrant. For the early human, a rustle in the grass demanded instant hair-trigger analysis. Was it a predator? A rival tribe? The cost of a false negative, assuming it was nothing when it was a lion, was death. The cost of a false positive, jumping at a gust of wind, was merely a moment of adrenaline and a racing heart. Evolution, therefore, heavily favored the paranoid. It wired us to assume the worst, to be hyper-vigilant to social slights and potential dangers, because in a small tribe social exclusion could mean death as surely as a predator's attack. Now, that same system is activated by 100 tiny interactions a day. An email from the boss that reads slightly terse, a social media post where we weren't tagged, the silent judgment we perceive from a stranger on the subway. Each one can trigger the same cascade of cortisol and adrenaline that was meant for a life or death chase. There is no lion to outrun, no physical battle to fight. The body prepares for a massive physical expenditure that never happens, leaving the hormones to slosh around in our system, eroding our health, fueling a constant low-grade anxiety. We are equipped with a fire alarm that was designed for a small, flammable hut, and we have placed it inside a sprawling, fireproofed castle. It goes off at the slightest hint of smoke from the kitchen, and we have forgotten how to turn it off. We often pathologize this state. We call it burnout, depression, social anxiety. We see it as a personal failing, a weakness of character in the face of a demanding world. But what if we have the equation backwards? The problem is not that modern society is too difficult. The problem is that our brains and bodies were never engineered to process this volume of information, this endless array of choices, this constant performative social connectivity. We are trying to run a graphics-intensive modern application on a processor that was built to solve basic problems of immediate survival. The system overheats, it glitches, it crashes. Our mental health crises are, in many ways, a form of systemic overheating, a natural response to a profoundly unnatural set of demands. So where does this leave us? We cannot, and would not want to, return to the cave. We cannot deny the electricity, the medicine, the art, the connection that our modern world provides. But we also cannot deny what we are. We are ancient creatures living a new experiment. The challenge, then, is not to conquer our nature, but to understand it, to listen to the whispers of our old hardware, to decipher its outdated error messages, and to build a life within our new world that acknowledges the ancient one we still carry within us. We must learn to be compassionate curators of our own instincts, building airlocks between the ancient world of our biology and the modern world of our creation. For if we are essentially prehistoric creatures navigating a digital age, then what does it mean to thrive? Is it to force our savanna minds to keep pace with the silicon rhythm of the machines we build? Or is it to design a world that makes a little more space for the slow, deep, animal peace we have left behind? We build glass towers that scrape the clouds and string conversations across oceans with light. We encode our collective wisdom into laws and teach our children calculus and ethics. Yet, in the quiet, private theater of the mind, a different script often plays out. A colleague receives a promotion, and a cold, sharp knot tightens in the stomach. A stranger's careless comment online ignites a firestorm of tribal fury. We still posture for status, covet what our neighbors have, and draw circles that separate us from them. Have we truly evolved, or have we merely constructed a dazzlingly complex greenhouse around the same ancient garden? We wear tailored suits and hold advanced degrees, yet beneath the crisp cotton and behind the diplomas, our brains are still running on software written for the savanna. We are, in our most fundamental social interactions, apes in a greenhouse. The context for this paradox is not found in our cities, but in our cells. The human brain, this 3-pound universe of consciousness, is not a blank slate upon which civilization writes its perfect laws. It is an archaeological site, a living artifact. Its deepest layers, the oldest structures in terms of evolution, hum with primal imperatives. The amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of neurons, still flinches at a perceived threat, with the same urgency it once did for an ancestor hearing a rustle in the grass. The rush of dopamine that rewards us for a successful social media post is the same chemical currency that once rewarded a successful hunt or a found fruit tree. Our drive for status is meticulously managed by the same neural circuits that once negotiated a place in the troop's dominance hierarchy, determining access to food, safety, and mates. We may sip espresso in a boardroom, but the ancient parts of our brain are still assessing the room for allies, rivals, and potential dangers, reacting to power, sex, threat, and sustenance on a timetable set millions of years ago. This is not a failing. It is our inheritance. Modern psychology and neuroscience have begun to map the old country that exists within our skulls. We see the ghost of our past in our present behaviors. The concept of dominance hierarchy is not confined to silverback gorillas. It is alive in the corporate ladder, in the subtle jockeying for influence in a community meeting, in the unspoken rules of a high school cafeteria. Our innate need for group bonding forged tight-knit tribes for mutual protection. Today, it fuels intense brand loyalty, nationalistic fervor, and the comforting echo chamber of our chosen social media feeds. And its dark twin, out-group hostility, the instinct to distrust and exclude the other, manifests in racism, partisan politics, and online mobs. We no longer fight over a fresh kill or the most sheltered cave, but we engage in fierce, often brutal competition for resources, now called promotions, investment capital, and prime real, Estate. The stage, props, and language have changed beyond recognition, but the underlying narratives of status, belonging, and survival are hauntingly familiar. To see this, one need only look at the world we've built. We imagine ourselves civilized, a species that has left its brutish origins behind, but cast a clear eye on the engines of our modern society. Social media, a hyper-efficient engine for triggering our deepest social anxieties and our most gratifying status rewards, a digital panopticon where we constantly perform and judge, seeking validation and asserting dominance through likes and shares. Politics, often less a reasoned debate about policy and more a raw, tribal conflict where the other side is framed not merely as opponents but as a threat to the very existence of the group. Religion, a powerful system that can channel our need for meaning and community into profound compassion, yet can also be twisted to justify the oldest of hatreds, drawing the ultimate in-group versus out-group line. Even our global economy, for all its sophisticated complexity, is ultimately driven by ancient, insatiable appetites for more, for better, for security, that once ensured we stored enough fat for the winter. The veneer is polished, but the grain of the ancient wood is still visible beneath. The traces of the ancestral ape are not just present, they are prolific, the foundation upon which our glittering world is built. This leaves us with a quiet, unsettling question. If our hardware is so fundamentally ancient, if we are indeed apes operating the controls of a starship, what is our path forward? Can we, through sheer force of will and intellect, upgrade the primal brain? Can we patch this old software with new code of pure reason and empathy? Or are we forever bound to its parameters, destined to merely manage its impulses, to build better greenhouses around the same untamable garden? Is our civilization a journey of transformation, or is it merely the most elaborate set of accommodations we've ever built for our immutable nature? We can teach the ape to wear a suit and program a computer, but can we ever teach it not to see the world in terms of kin and stranger, of status and threat, of resource scarcity and territorial gain? Or must we, instead of fighting this ancient self, learn to understand it, to make peace with its power, and to design a world that anticipates its failings while nurturing its strengths? The answer does not lie in denying the ape, but in truly seeing it. And in that seeing, perhaps we find not a cage, but a key. For if we are the first species to become aware of its own programming, does that awareness itself become the first tentative step toward a new kind of evolution? We are a species caught in a constant, quiet negotiation. On one hand, we compose symphonies, build particle accelerators, and send probes to the distant stars. On the other, a sudden flash of anger on the freeway, a primal pang of jealousy in a meeting, or the cold grip of irrational fear in the dead of night reminds us of a different heritage. Modern psychology, the fervent practice of mindfulness, our entire systems of education and self-betterment, they often feel like a collective desperate project to debug an ancient operating system. We are trying to install a sleek, modern software update onto hardware that was forged in the savanna, a mind that whispers of a world long gone. But is this a battle we can win? Or are we forever destined to simply live with the ape inside, a permanent tenant in the architecture of our own skulls? This internal conflict stems from a profound and unique evolutionary twist. We are, as far as we know, the only creatures on Earth who can step back and observe the very machinery of our own thoughts. This metacognition, this ability to watch the watcher, is a new development in the long story of life. For millions of years, consciousness was a direct line to action. See threat, flee, see food, eat, see mate, pursue. There was no narrator, no commentary, no space for reflection. Then, with the explosive growth of the neocortex, a new theater was built. Suddenly, the old impulses from the deeper, older brain regions, the limbic system's raw emotion, the brainstem's primal reflexes, were not just commands to be obeyed. They became events to be witnessed. We gained the capacity to see the storm of fear rising from our amygdala, to feel the surge of aggression from our reptilian core. But this awareness, this breathtaking leap in evolution, came with a catch. Observation does not automatically grant control. Knowing the storm is coming is not the same as being able to calm the seas. We are both the rider and the horse, and often the rider is just along for the ride, clinging on as the powerful animal beneath charges according to its own ancient instincts. This is where our modern tools of intervention come into play. They are not, as we might hope, a simple software patch that deletes our outdated programming. They are something far more nuanced and demanding. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, for instance, is not about silencing the inner ape. It is a meticulous process of teaching the new rider, the conscious, rational prefrontal cortex, to recognize the old trails the horse instinctively wants to run. A pang of social anxiety isn't just a feeling to be suffered. It's a misfired alarm bell from a time when tribal rejection meant death. CBT provides the tools for the rider to gently tug the reins, to show the horse that the modern conference room is not a primal hunting ground, that a critical comment is not a lethal threat. It is a rerouting, a conscious overriding of neural pathways through relentless, careful practice. Similarly, mindfulness and meditation are often mistaken for an attempt to empty the mind, to achieve a state of blank, peaceful neutrality. But that is a misunderstanding. True mindfulness is the ultimate act of non-judgmental observation. It is the practice of sitting on the riverbank of your own consciousness and watching the flotsam and jetsam of thought and emotion float by, the log of anger, the leaf of a forgotten memory, the bubbling froth of a future worry. You learn to see the ape not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a part of the landscape. You note its grunts and chest beating without feeling compelled to act on them. This practice, this sustained attention, slowly strengthens the rider. It builds the mental muscle to pause between stimulus and response, creating a crucial moment of choice. In that sliver of a second, we are no longer purely prey to our predator brain. We become its curator. So, can we truly update the monkey brain? The metaphor of a software update is too clean, too final. It implies a complete overhaul, a replacement of the core code. Our ancient brain is not a bug. It is a foundational feature. Its drive for survival, its capacity for fear, its hunger for status and connection. These are the engines that propelled us forward. They are the source of our passion, our protectiveness, our ambition. To try and delete them would be to dismantle the very foundation of our being. We cannot swap out the old motherboard for a newer, shinier model. What is possible, however, is a state of vigilant coexistence. It is the hard-won skill of living with awareness. It is the continuous practice of recognizing the ancient whispers for what they are, echoes from a different world. We learn to identify the moment the lizard brain hisses a warning, the moment the limbic system floods the body with chemicals meant for a physical fight. And in that recognition, we introduce a sliver of light, a fragment of freedom. We cannot stop the initial spark of jealousy, but we can choose not to let it fuel a destructive fire. We cannot avoid the flush of anger, but we can decide not to let it dictate our words. This is not about winning a war against ourselves, but about managing a permanent and delicate peace treaty. It is an endless negotiation between the cathedral and the cave, between the symphony and the primal drumbeat. For in the end, a human being is not a finished product, a perfectly optimized machine of pure reason. We are evolution's brilliant, messy, and unfinished draft, a breathtaking experiment that grafted a galaxy of self-aware consciousness onto the sturdy, ancient trunk of animal instinct. We are a work in progress, forever bridging the profound gap between what we were and what we might become. And if this is the permanent condition of our existence, this eternal tension between the rider and the horse, then what new, unimaginable tier of thinking might be required to truly harmonize them